Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shad Thyrion. Shad Thyrion was born on September 7, 1997, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, to parents Tara Pinich and Michael Tyrion. His parents later separated, and his mother started dating a man named Steve. Shad Thyrion grew up in a loving family that included his parents, two sisters, Ava and Svea, a brother, Beau Smith, and his younger sibling, Tyrion. He was also surrounded by a large, close-knit family that included paternal and maternal grandparents, as well as many aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and cousins. Additionally, Shad Thyrion had many friends who were like a second family to him. As a child, Shad attended Howard and Swo schools. However, he later decided to help out with the family business, working alongside his father and grandfather. Shad was a lively and adventurous person who enjoyed activities such as camping, gaming, and spending quality time with loved ones. Shad was a talented and artistic person who loved carving wood. He was also kind and compassionate, often putting others' interests before his own. His empathetic nature made him a loving family member. However, what happened to him is all the more tragic because of his good character. On the evening of February 23, 2022, Shad told his family that he was going out to meet two friends. They planned to hang out for the night, and his parents bid him goodbye around 9:30 p.m. At the time, no one knew the danger he was about to face. Shad's mother, Tara, had gone out for a while and returned a couple of hours later. She then went upstairs to sleep, unaware that her son had returned home with his friend Taylor and was in the basement. Several hours after midnight, Tara was awoken by the sound of the front door slamming shut as Taylor left. This startled her, and she came downstairs. Tara called out to her son, but when he didn't answer, she went down to the basement to look for him. As she entered the basement, she noticed a bucket with a rag covering it, and she removed the rag, revealing a horrific sight. Her son's severed head was inside the bucket. Panicked, she immediately called 911. "My son's head is in a bucket in my basement," she told the operator. When the operator asked her to confirm what she had seen, she replied, "I looked in a bucket and saw my son's head." When police officers arrived at her residence on Stony Brook Lane in Green Bay, Wisconsin, they secured the entire house before entering the basement. There, they were met with a gruesome scene that left them shocked. They knew they had to find the person responsible for the savage crime, as they posed a potential threat to society as a whole. During their investigation, detectives made a disturbing discovery in a bucket: Shad's severed genitalia and head. They then analyzed Shad's phone records and found that on the evening of February 23rd, he had agreed to meet his friends Taylor and Alexander. At around 9:30 p.m. Taylor picked up Shad to hang out at her apartment. According to Shad's mother, Tara, police questioned Taylor and Alexander at their homes. Taylor was living with her friend Scott Thomas at his house. At Taylor's residence, detectives found bloody footprints near her minivan leading up to her apartment. The investigators took Taylor to the station for additional questioning despite having already been charged with a horrific crime: beheading her ex-partner. A bizarre scene unfolded in the interrogation room as Taylor appeared unconcerned by the situation and instead focused on complaining about the room's cleanliness. As she sat, gazing at the camera, it became evident that she showed no signs of remorse or guilt over what she had done to Shad Thyrion. The detective got straight to the point and asked her how she knew Shad. Taylor replied that he was her ex-boyfriend. She also admitted that she had met with Shad on February 23rd in her apartment, where Scott was also present. Additionally, she confirmed that the minivan belonged to Scott. When questioned about the activities she, Shad, and Alexander did that night, Taylor readily confessed that they had smoked weed together. She explained that she was giving Shad a haircut while they smoked. However, after a while, Alexander decided to head home, citing the late hour. After Alexander left, Taylor and Shad decided to go to Shad's house, where he told her that his mother and her boyfriend would be coming home late. They went to Shad's house, where they used ice and also injected trazodone, a medication Taylor had stolen from her friend Scott. This revelation suggested that Taylor struggled with substance abuse, adding another layer of complexity to the case. During the interrogation, the detective realized that Taylor was under the influence of drugs, but continued questioning her anyway. Taylor told Detective Graff that Shad's body was still in the basement. When the detective asked for more details about what happened to Shad, Taylor claimed she couldn't remember, saying she had blacked out after smoking and drinking for a while. During the interrogation, Taylor initially attempted to deceive the detectives but soon realized her tactics were ineffective. She eventually confessed to being intimate with Shad on the night in question, revealing that their encounter involved various props, including a choke collar. As the questioning continued, Taylor acknowledged that she took pleasure in strangling Shad, and that he also enjoyed it. This behavior exposed her sadistic and violent tendencies. When asked about her preferences, Taylor clarified that she enjoyed being the one doing the strangling, rather than being on the receiving end. She also admitted to having a history of engaging in this behavior. When questioned about the whereabouts of the remaining body parts, Taylor expressed regret for not bringing Shad's head with her. However, this regret was not driven by remorse for her actions, but rather frustration with her own mistake, which ultimately led the police to her. The detective was surprised by her straightforward answers, which detailed the dismemberment of Shad's body. Taylor explained that some body parts were in the van, while others were in the basement. What was more astonishing was her lack of remorse after committing such a heinous crime. The conversation then shifted to the whereabouts of the body parts and organs. Taylor explained that they were all in a black bag. The detective wondered if they would need to take the head to a separate location, to which Taylor replied that it would be difficult to dispose of all the organs. The detective suspected Taylor's behavior was indicative of a disturbed psyche or mental health condition, hindering her emotional response to the crime. Alternatively, she might have been under the influence of drugs, triggering her to act on intrusive thoughts. During the interrogation, Taylor giggled and laughed while providing details of the crime, displaying a disturbing nonchalance. She casually admitted to dismembering her ex-lover with kitchen knives and not disposing of the body parts due to laziness. Her lack of emotion and calm demeanor raised doubts about her mental health and whether she had planned the harm. Taylor denied any intention, but her response lacked remorse. Taylor described how she strangled Shad with chains, admitting that she enjoyed the process and didn't stop even when Shad struggled. This behavior showcases her cruel and sadistic nature. During the interrogation, Taylor shocked the detectives by revealing that Taylor continued to engage in sex with Shad's body after discovering he had passed away. Taylor made a disturbing statement, claiming that when she loved something or someone too much, Taylor felt an overwhelming urge to kill it and lost control. This suggests that Taylor was fully aware of her actions when she dismembered Shad, as the incident occurred immediately after they had been intimate. Taylor openly discussed her disturbing actions after killing Shad, revealing a shocking disregard for human life. Taylor admitted to playing with his body for 2 to 3 hours after his death, demonstrating necrophiliac tendencies. Taylor also expressed regret over not taking any drugs after the incident, knowing it would have calmed her down. During the dismemberment and cleanup process, she became frustrated, but later claimed to have enjoyed it. Taylor explained that she was in a state of panic after the incident and didn't know how to react. She considered calling the police or an ambulance but didn't. When questioned by Detective David about her decision, Taylor expressed regret over her actions. She acknowledged that she had thought about seeking help but was overwhelmed by her emotions. In a later interrogation, Taylor provided a detailed and graphic account of how she dismembered the victim's body. Taylor pulled him over, his head hanging off the bed, near the tub. After I cut his head off, Taylor moved the tub underneath. Taylor explains the sequence. I beheaded the body, blood spilled into a pail, and the head fell in. I poured the contents into a blue Tupperware, finished cutting the head, and placed it in a container. The internal organs are in the Tupperware were scattered around, some in separate plastic bags. I put the bagged organs in a backpack, leaving the blood in the blue tub. Taylor Shawbusiness was born in Avon, Illinois in November 1997 to Maria and Arturo Coronado. When she was in 4th grade, her family relocated to Wisconsin. Later, she married Warren Shawbusiness and had a son, Matto, with him. Despite this, she reconnected with an ex-boyfriend, Shad Thyrion, and engaged in a relationship with him. After the heinous crime was committed, the authorities recognized that Taylor had significant mental health issues that required attention. However, they also determined that at the time of the crime, she was fully aware of her actions, which included the admission of enjoying the process of dismembering Shad's body. Taylor also confessed to using sex toys on his deceased body and engaging in other forms of physical intimacy with him. Taylor Shawbusiness was arrested on February 23, 2022, for the murder and dismemberment of her ex-partner, Shad Thyrion. Her trial began on July 24, 2022. Due to the severity of the crime, the court needed to determine whether Taylor was sane at the time of the crime and if she understood that her actions were wrong. During the trial, Taylor's grandmother testified about Taylor's difficult childhood. She explained that Taylor's mother had passed away at a young age and her father had remarried. Taylor had also experienced the loss of her brother, Arturo Coronado Jr., in a motorcycle accident in 2021. Additionally, Taylor's husband, Warren Shawbusiness, was already incarcerated for distributing methamphetamine and was also serving as Taylor's defender in court. The grandmother further revealed that Taylor's young son had been taken into custody by Child Protective Services just 24 hours after his birth. However, Taylor's grandmother and her husband were fighting to regain custody of their grandson, Matto. The grandmother attributed Taylor's turbulent upbringing to her struggles with depression and bipolar disorder. She emphasized that Taylor needed psychological help, but also deserved a second chance at life. Arturo Coronado, Taylor's 51-year-old father, was brought to the courtroom from prison, where he was serving time for assaulting a child. What was unsettling was Taylor's reaction to his presence. She couldn't stop smiling and giggling throughout his testimony. Despite her unusual behavior, her father provided a candid account of her upbringing. He acknowledged that Taylor had struggled in high school, which led him to send her to live with her grandparents in Texas, where she eventually graduated. He also revealed that Taylor had been admitted to a psychiatric center before the birth of her child, Matto, due to hallucinations and suicidal thoughts. According to her, Arturo Coronado, Taylor's life took a turn for the worse when she met her husband, who introduced her to drugs. When Alexander Gainan, a mutual friend of Taylor and Shad, took the stand to testify, Taylor continued to giggle and laugh throughout his statement. Alexander explained that he had known Taylor and Shad since their time at Bellevue Middle School, confirming that they had dated at the time. He also shared his account of the night of the murder, stating that he had been drinking with Taylor and others at her apartment, but left around 1 or 2 a.m. when it got late. Alexander added that he had attempted to contact Shad the following day, but received no response. At her next court appearance, Taylor was seen wearing a spit mask, typically used to prevent individuals from spitting on law enforcement or court staff. Valerie, Taylor's second cousin, and several distant relatives testified on her behalf, stating that while Taylor currently required psychological treatment, she deserved a second chance at life in the future. Kelly Thyrion criticized Taylor, saying her actions were cowardly and that her mental health issues shouldn't be a reason for parole. Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders concluded that Taylor's actions were not a result of her substance abuse or mental health issues, but rather a deliberate choice. He emphasized that her lack of remorse warrants the harsher sentence for such a heinous crime. Defense attorney Christopher Frolick argued Taylor deserves a second chance despite committing a horrific crime. He called the murder an honest mistake, suggesting Taylor didn't intentionally commit the crime or take pleasure in it. Frolick claimed Taylor was intoxicated and not fully aware of her actions when speaking with detectives. When Taylor requested a possible extension of the trial, her outburst in court revealed that Taylor was not only struggling with substance abuse, but also had deeper issues that required immediate attention. The trial concluded on September 26, 2022, with Judge Thomas Walsh sentencing Taylor to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case shocked the world due to the inhumane nature of the crime, in which Taylor dismembered her former lover, Shad Thyrion. What was even more disturbing was Taylor's apparent lack of remorse or guilt for the heinous crime she had committed. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jonathan Hoffman. Jonathan Hoffman was born in Michigan in 1994 to Jennifer and Michael Hoffman. His sister Jessica was born 3 years later, and from a very young age, the two siblings formed an unbreakable bond and shared a special connection that would last a lifetime. However, Jonathan's parents, Jennifer and Michael, faced significant struggles in their marriage, and their frequent fights often forced them to leave Jonathan and Jessica in the care of their grandmother, Sandra. Sandra, Jennifer's mother, played a crucial role in the lives of her grandchildren, providing a safe, loving, and nurturing environment for them. The children cherished the time they spent with their grandmother, who offered them a sense of stability in an otherwise tumultuous upbringing. In 2008, after years of turmoil, Jennifer and Michael divorced when Jonathan was a senior at Farmington Central High School. Following the divorce, Jennifer made the difficult decision to relocate the family from Michigan to Arizona. This move was particularly hard for Jonathan, who was forced to leave behind the only life he had ever known, including his friends, familiar surroundings, and the comfort of his childhood home. The situation rapidly deteriorated for Jonathan and his family after they moved to Arizona. Not long after their relocation, his younger sister Jessica fell critically ill. Medical tests revealed a tumor in her brain, prompting urgent surgery to remove it the very next day. Although the operation was a success, it entailed a lengthy convalescence, and Jessica spent an entire month recovering in the hospital. Throughout this period, Jennifer dedicated herself fully to her daughter's recovery, neglecting her own needs in the process. This left Jonathan feeling abandoned and lonely, forced to navigate the challenges of adolescence in a new state without the emotional support of his mother and sister. Recognizing the strain Jonathan was under, his grandmother Sandra reached out to Jennifer, deeply concerned about her grandson's well-being. Believing familiar surroundings and old friends would bring Jonathan solace, Sandra suggested he return to Michigan to live with her and her husband Fred. Jennifer worried whether her 74-year-old mother would be capable of caring for him, but Sandra reassured her that she was more than capable. 1 month after the Hoffman family's move to Arizona, Jonathan returned to Michigan and moved in with Sandra and Fred. The homecoming brought Jonathan immense joy and relief midway through his senior year of high school. Thrilled to be back among friends and family, he felt a sense of comfort and belonging he had missed in Arizona. His friends recall that Jonathan was initially shy, but once he opened up, he was a lot of fun and loved to make people laugh. With a zest for adventure, he was always up for trying new things. Although Jennifer deeply missed her son, she embarked on the journey to Michigan to spend 2 weeks with him. During her visit, she was dismayed to discover that Jonathan had been smoking marijuana. However, Jennifer viewed this as a typical phase of teenage experimentation and was confident it didn't involve harder substances. With a heavy heart, Jennifer bid farewell to Jonathan, confident that he would be in good hands with his grandmother. But little did she know, Jonathan was in grave peril, and it was at the hands of his grandmother, Sandra. On May 19, 2017, at 5:27 p.m., Jonathan Hoffman made a frantic 911 call, his voice trembling as he relayed to the dispatcher that his grandmother had shot him and he was dying. The dispatcher sprang into action, swiftly dispatching police and paramedics to Jonathan's residence. As she spoke to him, she tried to reassure him that help was on the way, her voice steady amidst the chaos and fear in his. Suddenly, an ominous silence fell on the line, and for a moment, the dispatcher feared the connection had been dropped, or worse, that Jonathan had succumbed to his injuries. But then, just as her heart sank, she heard a barrage of gunfire erupt from the phone, followed by a pained cry. Jonathan yelled, "Ow!" as his voice cracked with terror, telling the operator that his grandmother had shot him again. The West Bloomfield Township Police Department officers responded swiftly to the scene, arriving at Sandra Lane's house at 5:33 p.m. As they approached, the sound of gunfire echoed from within the residence. Trained to handle such situations, the officers didn't hesitate, taking necessary precautions to ensure their safety. They positioned themselves behind their patrol vehicles, using them as cover from their vantage point. Observing a woman moving inside the house, they issued clear, direct commands, ordering the individual to put their weapon on the ground. After a tense moment, the officers heard the sound of a gun being secured, and with the assurance that the person inside had put the firearm away, they entered the residence. When the police made it inside the home, they found 74-year-old Sandra Lane standing before them, a Glock 17 .40 caliber handgun at her feet. Sandra repeated several times in an eerily calm tone that she had murdered her grandson, stating the disturbing sentiment as fact. One of the police officers asked Sandra why she had killed her grandson, but she remained silent, offering no explanation. 2 minutes after the police arrived, Sandra was handcuffed and placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. Officers entered her home to find the victim, whom Sandra claimed was her grandson, 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. Inside the home, the air was thick with smoke, making it difficult to see through the haze as they ascended the staircase. They reached the landing where Jonathan lay motionless, face down on the hardwood floor, dressed in gym shorts and socks. The young man's body was riddled with gunshot wounds to his upper torso. Despite the severity of his condition, the medics managed to detect a faint pulse. With urgency, Jonathan was rushed to Botsford Hospital, where a team of medical professionals worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. However, their efforts ultimately proved futile, and after 30 minutes of intense medical intervention, he was pronounced dead. After the ambulance rushed Jonathan Hoffman to the hospital, police secured Sandra Lane's home as a crime scene. The 3-level residence was a labyrinth of violence and blood, with nearly every room telling a grim tale. Crime scene investigators arrived, meticulously combing the area for clues to unravel the shocking events. As they descended the basement staircase, they were struck by footprints in the blood-stained floor, crucial evidence carefully preserved. Deeper in the house, the team found 10 bullet casings scattered throughout, each one collected and analyzed. One investigator discovered a bullet hole in the drywall, and the search for more evidence led them to the second floor, where a gun case filled with ammunition was found. While gathering evidence, investigators took extra care to photograph Sandra, capturing her face, arms, and hands as she sat in the patrol car. Sandra became overwhelmed, tears streaming down her face. Amidst the chaos, Fred Lane, Sandra's husband, appeared outside the house with their dog, claiming to have been gone for an hour, a walk he took after Sandra asked him to. Fred was stunned to discover that his wife, Sandra Lane, had confessed to shooting and killing their grandson Jonathan after he was pronounced dead at the hospital. The police faced the daunting task of breaking the news to Jonathan's family that their beloved son had been murdered by his own grandmother. As detectives dug deeper into the case, they learned that Jonathan had been living in Michigan, separated from his parents and sister who resided in Arizona. When the detectives shared the devastating news with Jennifer, informing her that her mother had taken the life of her cherished son, she was left in a state of utter disbelief. It seemed unbelievable that someone who was supposed to love and care for their grandchildren could commit such an atrocity. The fact that Jonathan was his grandmother's favorite made the tragedy even more incomprehensible, leaving everyone wondering how he met his end at Sandra's hands. As the day drew to a close, around 7:30 p.m., the police decided to take Sandra Lane to the hospital for a health evaluation, given her advanced age. While waiting in the emergency room, Sandra maintained that Jonathan had never harmed her, describing him as a kind boy who never hurt anyone. After a medical assessment, the doctors cleared Sandra of any suspicious injuries. With this, the police decided to return her to the patrol car and take her to the police department for further questioning. On May 20th, after midnight, Sandra's attorney met her at the police station before she provided her official statement to the police. Seated alongside her attorney, Sandra sought legal counsel when the detectives eventually met with them. Sandra's story took a dramatic turn at the police station. Contradicting her initial statement at the hospital, where she had claimed her grandson was not involved, she now alleged that she and Jonathan had engaged in a heated altercation involving yelling and screaming. During this confrontation, Jonathan had kicked her in the stomach, leaving her fearing for her life. According to Sandra, Jonathan's behavior had become increasingly erratic and angry of late. He would come and go from her house at all hours, frequently bringing over people she didn't care for. Furthermore, Sandra had noticed that valuables had gone missing from her home, leading her to suspect that Jonathan or his friends might be involved in theft. Sandra also mentioned that her grandson had a history of run-ins with the law. Sandra stated that Jonathan was pulled over by an officer while driving, and cannabis was found in his car. However, this didn't deter him, and he was stopped again by an officer shortly after. This time, he was found to be in possession of Adderall. Sandra also recalled an incident where she had to call 911 due to Jonathan's aggressive behavior. During that episode, he was yelling obscene remarks at her. Despite this, when the police arrived, Sandra persuaded them not to arrest him. According to Sandra, she was compelled to buy a gun due to Jonathan's behavior. Sandra alleged that everything escalated on May 18th when she accompanied Jonathan to the probation department due to his non-compliance with his probation terms. After returning home, Sandra stated that Jonathan threatened to take her car, which led to him attacking her. Since there were no witnesses to Jonathan's shooting apart from Sandra, the detectives faced a significant challenge in verifying her account. Sandra claimed self-defense, prompting the detectives to conduct a thorough investigation into the incident. Their primary concern was ensuring they didn't wrongfully send a 74-year-old frail grandmother to prison for defending herself against a violent teenage boy. The detectives examined the photo taken by crime scene investigators immediately after Sandra confessed to shooting Jonathan. However, upon reviewing the evidence, they found no signs of violence on Sandra, not a single scratch, which would be expected if she had indeed been in a physical struggle. During her court arraignment, the judge ruled that Sandra should be held on bond while awaiting trial at the correctional facility. Paul Walton, the prosecutor on the case, believed the 911 call made by Jonathan clashed with Sandra's self-defense claim. Upon listening to the call, Walton noticed a significant 2-minute and 51-second silence before Sandra fired another shot at Jonathan. Based on his observations, it seemed clear that Jonathan was already severely injured and no longer posed an immediate threat to Sandra. However, Sandra's defense team presented a contrasting argument. They countered that Jonathan still posed a threat despite his injuries. The defense highlighted a portion of the 911 call where Sandra yells, "Let go," implying that Jonathan was still attacking his grandmother, even in his injured state. The defense argued that Sandra was simply an innocent and loving grandmother. They pointed to the end of the 911 call, where Sandra can be heard instructing her bleeding grandson to lie down and promising to get him water, as proof of her compassionate nature. According to the defense, these statements revealed Sandra's true character as a caring and empathetic woman. Prosecutor Walton was perplexed by Sandra Lane. Was she a doting grandmother forced to make the ultimate sacrifice in a desperate situation, or a ruthless killer who stalked her own grandson, callously ending his life in the woods? To uncover the truth, Prosecutor Walton conducted a series of interviews around town. The testimonies uniformly portrayed Sandra as an ordinary, kind-hearted grandmother. She regularly visited the local salon, actively participated in her synagogue, taught Sunday school, and volunteered her time. Her generosity and affluence were also well known. What struck the detectives most was the resoundingly positive feedback from those who knew Sandra. They described her as deeply devoted to her grandchildren, particularly Jonathan. The testimony seemed to starkly contradict the heinous act she had confessed to committing. However, a different narrative unfolded when the detectives spoke with Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, and Jonathan's mother. Jennifer offered a contrasting perspective on her mother's character, contradicting the image projected by the community. She described her mother as a controlling and abusive figure, vastly different from the warm and compassionate person others had portrayed. According to Jennifer, her childhood was marked by constant parental fighting, with her mother physically assaulting her on multiple occasions. Her father's frequent absences left Sandra in complete control of the household, allowing her to behave like a tyrant, prone to violent outbursts. Years later, when Sandra remarried Fred Lane, Jennifer witnessed a significant shift in her mother's behavior. Sandra expressed deep affection for Fred, believing him to be a stabilizing influence in their home. Initially, her controlling nature seemed to subside. However, after Jennifer gave birth to Jonathan, Sandra allegedly attempted to reassert her dominance. Jennifer claimed that her mother's obsession with the baby bordered on an unhealthy level, with Sandra becoming so fixated that Jennifer jokingly wondered if she wanted to kidnap the child. After Sandra was charged with murdering her grandson Jonathan, the community of West Bloomfield surprisingly rallied around her. A significant number of residents believed Jonathan was a drug user who got what was coming to him, sparking a wave of support for Sandra. On social media, community members posted messages of encouragement, affectionately referring to her as Granny and using the hashtag #GoGrannyGo. In this narrative, Jonathan was vilified as a monster, while Sandra was portrayed as an innocent, frail, elderly woman. Jennifer revealed that most of her family had bought into Sandra's self-defense story, effectively disowning both Jonathan's memory and herself. Throughout the ordeal, Sandra's husband Fred stood by her side, offering unconditional support. The medical examiner concluded that Jonathan Hoffman's death was a homicide resulting from the multiple gunshot wounds he suffered. An examination of the wounds revealed stippling, indicating that the gun was fired from varying distances. Additionally, a toxicology report revealed the presence of synthetic marijuana, also known as spice, or specifically K2, in Jonathan's system. At the time, spice was widely available in West Bloomfield, particularly among teens and young adults, who could purchase it at gas stations without identification. There were numerous reports of individuals experiencing adverse reactions to the substance, including violent behavior after consumption. 1 month prior to Jonathan's death, a disturbingly similar incident occurred involving another student from the same high school. Michael Cipriano, a classmate of Jonathan's, murdered his father, Robert, after a heated verbal argument. According to reports, Michael was under the influence of the synthetic drug spice at the time of the attack. Jonathan's sister, Jessica, harbored a deep affection for her brother, but she was also aware of his emotional instability and occasional violent outbursts. Despite her reluctance to consider it, she couldn't shake the suspicion that her brother might have harmed their grandmother, leading her to ultimately shoot and kill him. 2 months after her arrest, Sandra was arraigned in circuit court and indicted on 2 additional charges: possession of a firearm and committing a felony. Furthermore, she faced a distinctive charge known as open murder, which is only applicable in select states such as Nevada and Michigan. This unique charge encompasses both first and second-degree murder. Prosecutor Paul Walton was concerned that the jury might hesitate to convict a grandmother of premeditated murder, so he opted to present the jury with a broader range of options. This decision displeased the defense, who felt that the prosecution was shirking their responsibility. In 2013, Sandra Lane faced trial for the murder of her grandson, sparking widespread national outrage. Many directed blame at the boy's mother, Jennifer, for sending him to Michigan to stay with Sandra. Throughout the trial, the defense portrayed Sandra as a devoted and loving grandmother, but the prosecution disputed her claim of self-defense. They presented telling images of Sandra taken after the shooting, highlighting inconsistencies. Her clothes remained unripped, her jewelry was still intact, and her hair was styled as usual. Moreover, bloody footprints found in the basement, matching Sandra's shoes, implied that she had searched for additional ammunition. After the prosecution rested its case, Sandra's defense team presented their argument to bolster their stance. Sandra's attorney took a calculated risk by allowing her to testify on her own behalf. The attorney believed it was crucial for the jury to hear directly from Sandra herself, giving a first-hand account of the experiences she had while living with her grandson Jonathan in the months leading up to his tragic death. According to Sandra, Jonathan had a history of violent outbursts, often kicking in doors and breaking objects. On one occasion, he even shattered a computer monitor. On the day of the incident that ultimately led to Jonathan's death, Sandra alleged that he struck her in the head, leaving her feeling threatened and terrified. As a result, she decided to retrieve her gun, hoping it would serve as a deterrent to protect herself. Her intention, as stated in her testimony, was not to take her grandson's life, but rather to stop him from getting back up and attacking her again. However, during cross-examination by prosecutor Paul Walton, Sandra's account began to unravel. Under Walton's pressure, Sandra conceded that her motivation for obtaining the gun was not fear for her safety, but rather a desire to get Jonathan to listen to her. This admission severely undermined her credibility as a witness and made it increasingly difficult to argue self-defense. Experts testified that the K2 spice found in Jonathan's urine at the time of his death suggested he was not under the influence of the drug when he died. The presence of the drug in his urine indicated that it had already been metabolized, casting doubt on Sandra's claim that Jonathan was high on the drug and violent. After hearing the evidence presented at the trial, the jury deliberated for 2 days before returning a guilty verdict for second-degree murder and the use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. Sandra was subsequently sentenced to 20 years in prison. Proved to be the most challenging month of the year for Kia and her family. Despite their efforts to infuse the holiday spirit into their home with decorations, gingerbread baking, and caroling, Kia couldn't shake off the sadness in her eyes. She held on to hope, awaiting Santa's arrival, yet deep down, she knew the greatest gift would never return. On what should have been Nadine's 32nd birthday, Phoebe, her sister, honored her memory with a heartfelt video tribute, concluding with Kia singing a song dedicated to their beloved mother. For Claire, life without Nadine was an endless cycle of torment, haunted by nightmares and memories. Daniel's name was taboo in their household, and David shared in their despair. Despite Christmas passing, grief shrouded them, unable to fill the void left by Nadine's absence. On January 14, 2020, Daniel faced court proceedings via video call, his lawyer requesting a psychiatric evaluation, approved by Judge David Kennedy. Daniel confessed to the murder, blaming intoxication from substances consumed that fateful night. The trial, overseen by Judge Michael Magram and a jury of 7 men and 5 women, was marked by prosecutor John O'Kelly's presentation of damning evidence, detailing Daniel's cruelty towards Nadine. Throughout the 3-week trial, Nadine's family faced the painful reality in the courtroom, while Kia chose to spend some days at home with her granddaughter. Daniel's lack of remorse, evident in his fake displays of affection towards his mother, disgusted Claire. Testimonies from the intensive care unit nurse painted a grim picture of Nadine's condition, further solidifying Daniel's guilt. Throughout it all, Daniel never offered an apology to Nadine's family, leaving Claire disillusioned by his insincerity. The chilling echoes of mutilated words reverberated mercilessly down the cold, shadowy corridors, each syllable plunging Claire's soul deeper into an abyss of agony. Dr. Linda's relentless discourse stretched over 2 grueling hours, meticulously detailing every gruesome injury inflicted upon Nadine. With each description, the weight of the brutality bore down heavily upon Claire's heart, a relentless assault on her senses. As Dr. Linda's voice pierced through the air, Daniel remained eerily composed, his demeanor untouched by the harrowing accounts laid bare before him. It was as though the suffering of Nadine and her shattered family were mere trifles to him, inconsequential in the face of his own self-absorption. Refusing to acknowledge his guilt, Daniel's defiance only served to amplify Claire's anguish. His steadfast denial, devoid of remorse or empathy, cast him further into the depths of his own depravity. Despite the damning verdict that condemned him to a lifetime behind bars, Daniel's indifference persisted, a stark reminder of the darkness that dwelled within him. But even as the gavel fell and justice was seemingly served, the wounds of Nadine's family festered, raw and unhealed. The leniency of Irish law, offering a mere 18 years for a life extinguished, felt like a cruel mockery, a mockery that Claire and Nadine's loved ones could not accept. In the unforgiving confines of Whitfield Prison, Daniel found himself marked for retribution, a target among predators hungry for vengeance. Isolated from his fellow inmates for his own safety, he remained defiant, his arrogance unyielding even in the face of imminent danger. Yet, fate's relentless hand struck again within the walls of Midlands Prison, where Daniel became the victim of another inmate's brutal assault. Hospitalized and scarred, he bore the physical remnants of his own malevolence, a grotesque reminder of the pain he had inflicted upon Nadine and those who loved her. Nadine's story, a tragic testament to the horrors of domestic violence, reverberated far beyond the shores of Ireland. Born in Arlo, a beacon of hope on the southeastern coast, her light was extinguished far too soon, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and a family torn asunder by grief. In the summer of 2012, 3 sisters, Phoebe, Tanith, and Kayla, embarked on a journey of adventure. Among them was Nadine, a captivating 26-year-old woman with plans to explore the wonders of Australia. With a heart brimming with anticipation, Nadine looked forward to a vacation filled with thrilling escapades, sports, and the prospect of forging new friendships. Nadine's essence radiated a unique charm that captivated those around her. Her laughter and radiant smile had a way of enchanting everyone she encountered. Despite her outgoing nature, Nadine harbored a sensitive soul, always seeing the goodness in people. She treasured her family deeply, finding solace and support in their love. Photography became Nadine's passion as she sought to capture fleeting moments of beauty in the world. What began as a hobby soon blossomed into a successful career where Nadine used her talents to enhance the beauty of others. In matters of the heart, Nadine treaded cautiously, cherishing her independence and relishing the company of friends. However, fate intervened when she crossed paths with Daniel, a reserved yet intriguing man from Dublin. Despite their stark differences in demeanor, Nadine found herself drawn to Daniel's piercing gaze and quiet strength. Their connection deepened as they explored the exotic landscapes of Australia together, sharing intimate moments and dreams beneath the sun-kissed skies. Watching Daniel conquer the waves while surfing, Nadine saw admiration and affection reflected in his eyes. Despite the geographical distance and the mysteries surrounding Daniel's life in Dublin, their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Nadine and Daniel's time together in Australia was a symphony of enchantment, promising a love that transcended boundaries. Their connection blossomed swiftly, although Nadine regarded it as a playful flirtation with no strings attached. Phoebe, Nadine's younger sister, was the first to be informed, followed by their mother, Claire, who quickly discerned the casual nature of the relationship. In June of 2013, Nadine returned home bearing unexpected news. She was pregnant with Daniel's child. Despite their attempts to forge a proper family, their relationship floundered, and Nadine found herself navigating the journey of motherhood alone when she gave birth to their daughter, Kia, in November of the same year. Phoebe stood steadfastly by her side, offering support and becoming a guiding presence in those early, challenging days of motherhood. Nadine's pregnancy marked a profound turning point in her life. Despite the dissolution of her relationship with Daniel, she embraced her role as a mother and found new purpose. Phoebe's unwavering support was instrumental during this period of transition. Nadine's story, though tinged with tragedy, is a testament to the power of love and familial bonds. Disappointed by her relationship with Daniel, Nadine longed for a stable and loving environment for her daughter. However, Daniel showed no signs of maturing into a responsible father figure. While Nadine tirelessly worked to provide for Kia, Daniel remained stagnant, refusing to take on the responsibilities of parenthood. In 2016, desperate to create a sense of family for Kia, Nadine made a final attempt by renting a house where they could all live together. However, Daniel's failure to follow through shattered Nadine's hopes for reconciliation. It was a pivotal moment for Nadine, as she came to terms with the reality of Daniel's absence and the broken promises that had plagued their relationship. Despite the pain and disappointment, Nadine emerged stronger, guided by the love for her daughter and the unwavering support of her sister. In the end, Nadine's journey was not defined by the failures of her relationship with Daniel, but by her resilience and determination to create a better life for herself and her daughter. Although Nadine and Daniel had separated, she did not lose hope that Kia would be able to keep in touch with her father. Unlike Nadine, Claire knew that Daniel wouldn't change. His only passion was boxing, and his family and daughter were not important to him. Despite all the difficulties, Nadine stayed strong. She continued to take care of Kia, giving her the love and support that she herself had not received from her father. Even though her daughter grew up without a father, she had an example of a strong and ambitious mother who taught her to never give up. Claire suggested that Nadine go to Rome to celebrate her birthday. The trip took place in October 2019. Arriving in Rome, going out on the terrace and enjoying the air filled with the smell of coffee and fresh pastries, Nadine confessed to her mother that she was going through a difficult period in her life. Her relationship with Daniel did not lead to anything good. Nadine did not need him and was good at being a mother. She liked her job, her home, and was proud of her achievements. Soon, Nadine was offered a job as a model. At that moment, she saw her future as promising and happy. Back in Ireland, Nadine was disappointed to learn that Daniel continued to make empty promises to visit Kia. One day, when Daniel was supposed to give Nadine money for their daughter, he asked for a meeting. Nadine immediately suspected that it was just an excuse to meet her and not Kia, but she could not refuse. At the same time, Nadine did not want to ruin Daniel's image in Kia's eyes. She still had hope to create a real family, although it seemed more and more impossible every day. Coming up with new excuses for the absence of her father, Nadine tried to protect her baby from disappointment and pain. She didn't want her daughter to suffer from Daniel's irresponsibility and ignorance. Despite this, Daniel did not want to break up with Nadine and let her go. He was afraid that she might start dating other men. Because of this, Nadine was forced to hide her personal life from him in order to avoid his constant control and threats. By the end of 2019, Nadine's life began to change. She left behind her relationship with Daniel. Despite this, Nadine looked forward to the future with hope and started dating a guy from Turkey. However, her attempts to keep this relationship a secret from Daniel were in vain. He found out about her new partner and was angry and furious. Unable to come to terms with the loss of control over Nadine, Daniel began to stalk her, turning her life into a nightmare. On December 5th, tired of the constant threats and insults, Nadine texted Daniel. She made it clear to him that their relationship was over and demanded that the harassment stop. Nadine firmly believed that this would put an end to this exhausting and tiring relationship. On December 13th, Nadine asked Daniel to babysit Kia as she was going to celebrate her aunt's birthday at a local pub. They agreed that Daniel would stay with Kia at Nadine's house while she spent time with her family. Daniel and Nadine lived in different cities. Daniel lived in London, and Nadine lived in Wicklow. On the night of December 14th, Daniel called Nadine several times at 11:57 p.m. and at 1:26 a.m., but there was no answer. Eventually, he sent her a message asking her to come back. Soon after Nadine returned home, she quickly changed her clothes, but what happened next remains unclear. However, we know that Daniel attacked Nadine and scared her 6-year-old daughter, Kia. One of the neighbors, Ayla Klenovich, heard the noise and screams, went to the house, and saw the open door to Nadine's apartment with the light on. She decided to check what was going on there. At the doorstep, Camila was met with a harrowing sight. Nadine lay sprawled on the floor of the hallway, with Daniel looming over her, his face twisted in a mixture of rage and panic. Overwhelmed with horror, Camila rushed back to her apartment, her trembling hands immediately dialing Nadine's family to relay the dreadful truth. As Claire listened to the tale, her demeanor turned icy, a whirlwind of unsettling thoughts racing through her mind, a foreboding sense settling in. Meanwhile, Daniel, consumed by his fury, fled the scene in his Volvo, leaving behind a haze of dust and the lingering stench of blood. Upon bursting into Nadine's apartment, a grisly scene unfolded before Claire's eyes. The walls of the hallway splattered with blood like strokes of an artist's brush, shattered glass and mirrors reflecting the gruesome reality of what transpired. Yet, this was only the beginning. At 9:50 a.m., Claire, Phoebe, and Kyle entered the kitchen, only to be met with a gut-wrenching sight. Nadine's lifeless body lay before them, torn and devoid of life. Simultaneously, some 20 miles away in the town of La, Daniel's recklessness met its end as his car careened into a ditch. Emerging from the wreckage, Daniel appeared dazed, his eyes vacant, his trembling form coated in blood. Confessing to a bewildered witness, he spoke in a voice laden with despair, admitting to the heinous act, his words echoing like a plea for absolution. As Daniel was whisked away to the hospital in an ambulance, his murmurs of love for Nadine hung in the air, as if he sought forgiveness in his darkest hour. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in Nadine's apartment. Stepping through the threshold, paramedics and police officers were met with the thick scent of blood. The scene before them, a testament to the brutality that unfolded within. Among them, paramedic Ian Clark was struck by the extent of the devastation. Broken dishes, shattered glass, and bloody footprints painted a grim portrait of a violent crime. Phoebe and Kyle, filled with grief and confusion, she lay unconscious, her body unrecognizable. An ambulance rushed Nadine to St. Vincent's Hospital, where she was admitted to the intensive care unit at 10:58 a.m. Doctors noted severe injuries to Nadine's head, neck, and chest, expressing concern over her condition, especially upon discovering 64 additional injuries of unknown origin on her body. Despite multiple blood transfusions, Nadine's critical condition remained stable. Claire, refusing to lose hope, stood vigilantly by Nadine's side, holding on to the belief that her daughter would return home. She surrounded Nadine with familiar belongings, including photographs, perfumes, and toys, hoping to provide comfort and support during this ordeal. Though unsure of what lay ahead, Claire was determined to weather the storm alongside her daughter, convinced that love and care would see them through. On December 16th, as Nadine fought for her life, Daniel faced a court appearance, ultimately being remanded into custody pending further trial. Later that afternoon, Claire accompanied Nadine for a follow-up examination of her cerebral cortex, praying for her daughter's strength to persevere. Tragically, on December 17th, between 3 and 4 p.m., Nadine drew her final breath, never regaining consciousness. Her most severe injuries proved fatal. The Irish police colonel, Dean McCarthy, deemed this violent crime one of the most heinous he had encountered. Dr. Linda Mogan, the chief state pathologist, conducted Nadine's autopsy at the city funeral home on December 18th. Left alone with her thoughts, Claire grappled with unanswered questions, struggling to comprehend the reasons behind the tragedy. The following day, Daniel recounted the harrowing details of the event. In the narrative of the assault, he recounted how he struck her and utilized the charger cord to strangle her. Initially, he targeted Nadine, delivering blows to her head despite her attempts to resist. Daniel persisted, employing various violent methods, including stabbing and strangling Nadine with the cord. Throughout the ordeal, Kia, Nadine's daughter, cried out, pleading with her father to cease the violence and spare her mother's life, but her pleas went unanswered. Despite Nadine's desperate struggles, Daniel's strength prevailed, and he continued the assault until morning. A funeral service was held on December 22nd at St. Mary and Peter's Church in Arlo, Nadine's hometown. Over 1,000 mourners gathered to bid farewell to her, with the church overflowing and hundreds more watching via live broadcast. 6 individuals solemnly carried Nadine's casket, adorned with scarlet velvet roses, resembling Snow White, peacefully at rest. In the front row, Nadine's mother, Claire, struggled to contain her tears, her eyes filled with love and admiration for her daughter. Surrounding her were grieving relatives and friends, openly expressing their sorrow. David, Nadine's father, approached the altar, his voice trembling with emotion and tears streaming down his face as he placed one of Nadine's handbags beside her casket, a poignant reminder of her elegance and charm. A family friend, Kyle, held a trembling photo of Nadine and Kia, radiating happiness and affection. Meanwhile, Kia, still grappling with confusion and grief, clung to her mother's coffin, unaware of the full extent of the tragedy. Phoebe, Nadine's sister, fought back tears as she brought her pair of shoes to the altar, the same ones Nadine had planned to wear to the prom. Tanith, another close friend, approached with delicate care, placing a photo album brimming with cherished memories on the polished wooden table. Each page held snapshots, capturing the essence of Nadine's vibrant spirit and radiant smile, images destined to eternally reside within the depths of their hearts. Priest Michael Moore, a beacon of sincere empathy, took his place at the altar, his countenance a reflection of the collective sorrow filling the chapel. With gentle yet firm words, he commenced the ceremony, his voice weaving a tapestry of eternal life and hopeful promises. To the grieving assembly, his words were like a soothing melody, offering solace to wounded hearts. In a moment of profound tenderness, Priest Michael turned his attention to little Kia, a beacon of innocence amidst the sea of mourning. With a paternal warmth, he expressed gratitude for the joy she had brought Nadine, and tenderly voiced hope for her future, promising an abundance of care and love. He pledged that they, the gathered mourners, would stand as Kia's guardian angels, a shield against life's harshness. Phoebe and Tanith, their voices choked with emotion, stepped forward to speak the final words, their love and grief intertwining in a poignant tribute to their beloved sister. Tears flowed freely as they bid their farewells, their hearts heavy with the weight of loss. As the strains of funeral music filled the air, marking the close of the ceremony, Nadine's coffin was gently lowered into the earth, finding its final resting place in the hallowed grounds of San Gabriel Cemetery. Loved ones gathered to bid their last goodbyes, their whispered prayers, a solemn tribute to a life lost too soon. In memory of Nadine's spirit and to provide support for Kia, who now faced a future without parental guidance, the Nadine Lot Charity Fund was established. A testament to the enduring legacy of love and compassion, it would serve as a beacon of hope for those in need, ensuring that Nadine's light would continue to shine brightly in the lives of others. In May 2020, amidst the warmth of spring, Grace Holland found herself engulfed in an inferno of despair. In a frantic and hysterical state, she clutched the cold steel of a gun, her reflection in the dim bathroom mirror mirroring the turmoil within her soul. The Holland family, paralyzed by fear, dared not reach out for help as the specter of Robert, Grace's husband, cast a long shadow over their tragedy. In June 2020, the nightmare intensified as Robert launched a brutal attack on Grace in the confines of their home. Ripping at her clothes and delivering vicious blows, he left behind a mosaic of bruises, silent testimony to his cruelty. Grace, trapped like a bird in a cage, yearned for escape, but found her efforts futile. Desperate, she documented the evidence of her suffering, capturing haunting images of her bruised body. In a moment of sheer desperation, she reached out to her mother, only to be met with Robert's chilling threats, dismissing her cries for help as madness. Each word uttered by Robert pierced through the heart of Grace's mother, a painful reminder of her daughter's torment. How much longer could Grace endure this living nightmare? How could she break free from the suffocating grip of this hellish existence? Grace's narrative transcends mere tragedy. It echoes the anguished plea of a soul trapped in despair, a desperate cry for aid amidst the engulfing darkness. Born on September 23, 1984, in the serene town of Creve, Missouri, Grace Holland was nurtured in the embrace of a loving and supportive family. Alongside her twin sister Laura and another sibling, she traversed the pathways of childhood, exploring, dreaming, and cherishing the bonds of kinship. Her education in a Catholic school instilled in her a sense of discipline, while her pursuit of a degree in criminal justice fueled her passion for upholding the principles of law and order. Grace's innate sense of purpose and responsibility guided her path, leading her to embrace a career dedicated to serving and safeguarding others. Following her graduation, Grace embarked on a journey marked by marriage and motherhood, the arrival of 4 children becoming the focal point of her existence. With boundless love and unwavering devotion, Grace embraced the role of motherhood, delighting in the opportunity to nurture and shape the lives of her offspring. Proudly sharing snapshots of her cherished children with all who crossed her path, she reveled in the joys of parenthood, cherishing each precious moment spent in their company. In 2015, Grace's life underwent a profound transformation when she crossed paths with Robert Deus, the esteemed head of the Maryland County Fire Department. His valiant profession and heroic demeanor immediately captured her attention, igniting a whirlwind of emotions between them. Grace was drawn to Robert's striking blend of bravery, intellect, and compassion, while he, in turn, was captivated by her beauty, intelligence, and unwavering kindness. Yet, behind Robert's impeccable facade lay the shadow of a tumultuous past. His brother David, a former St. Louis police officer, had been embroiled in a grave scandal in 1998, casting a pall over the family's reputation and irrevocably altering David's trajectory. Nearly 2 decades later, David's untimely demise left behind a trail of unanswered questions and concealed secrets, shrouding the family in further turmoil. Robert's narrative became intricately intertwined with the legacy of his brother David. David's influence as a respected law enforcement officer had not only shaped Robert's career, but also facilitated his ascent up the ranks of the profession. The echoes of David's past reverberated through Robert's present, underscoring the complexity of familial bonds and the enduring impact of past events on the trajectory of one's life. Alongside his duties in the fire department, Robert held the position of deputy president at Liberty Arts Works, a family-owned company specializing in crafting memorials for fallen military personnel, firefighters, and police officers. This endeavor, coupled with his active involvement in initiatives supporting first responder services through organizations like Backstoppers, significantly bolstered Robert's standing within professional circles. Although Robert had a child from his previous marriage, which didn't yield the desired happiness, he embarked on a new marital journey with Grace, a detective in the Maryland police force. This union not only enhanced his influence in law enforcement, but also symbolized a fresh start for both of them. With fervor, they set about building their shared future, investing in a new home that epitomized their unity. Yet, beneath the veneer of success, cracks began to emerge. Despite Robert's thriving career and seemingly idyllic personal life, the specter of his brother's past transgressions cast a shadow over his own reputation, raising doubts about his integrity. Moreover, undisclosed issues surfaced within his marriage to Grace, gradually unraveling the facade of their picture-perfect union. Laura, Grace's twin sister, offered insight into the tumultuous nature of their relationship, likening it to a roller coaster ride, marred by alternating bouts of tranquility and explosive arguments. According to Laura, Robert exerted undue control over Grace's life, dictating her actions and relationships, thereby straining their once promising bond. The dissolution of Grace's friendship under Robert's influence, served as a poignant testament to the cracks forming in their relationship. Laura's revelation about Grace's severed friendship with her best friend, following a dinner attended by Robert, added another layer of mystery to the unraveling saga. The exact reason behind the breakup remained shrouded in ambiguity, deepening Grace's sense of isolation from her support network. According to Laura, Grace confided that Robert coerced her into resigning from her job and joining the family business. Despite the absence of official documentation regarding her employment, the family insisted that Robert compelled the company to provide financial support to Grace without formal records. This arrangement, fraught with opacity, exacerbated Grace's vulnerability. Amidst these tumultuous circumstances, Grace discovered she was pregnant with Robert's child. Rather than elation, this news intensified the strain on their relationship. Court records, presented by the Holland family during the trial, laid bare the stark contrast in their aspirations. While Grace expressed a desire to keep the child and salvage their relationship, Robert advocated for termination. Shockingly, court materials revealed Robert's offer to pay Grace $1,600 for an abortion, underscoring his eagerness to rid himself of paternal responsibilities. The summer of 2020 in Missouri bore witness to a tragedy that shook the community to its core: the untimely demise of 30-year-old Grace Holland. What began as a promising engagement with Robert Dace Jr., the fire department chief, swiftly transformed into a harrowing loss, leaving an indelible scar on the hearts of her loved ones. The circumstances surrounding Grace's death, veiled in mystery, plunged her family and the St. Louis police into a realm of uncertainty. As official explanations remained elusive, skepticism flourished, fueled by the deafening silence from authorities. Grace's mother found herself unjustly under the weight of suspicion, fueling the family's resolve to unearth the truth. Initially, progress in the investigation languished, prompting the family to initiate legal action and unearth evidence independently. Grace Holland's case transcended state lines, capturing national attention as a pivotal moment demanding justice. On October 29, 2021, Laura Holland, Grace's sister, penned a poignant letter shared on the police department's Facebook page. In it, she recounted Grace's harrowing ordeal, haunted by the specter of Robert's erratic and aggressive conduct, as she desperately sought refuge from the Maryland Fire Department. On June 24, 2020, amidst the turmoil of their tumultuous relationship, Grace clandestinely recorded one of their heated arguments with her husband. This recording, later shared with Laura, served as damning evidence of their abusive dynamic. In the audio, Robert unleashed a torrent of insults at Grace, callously expressing his disdain for their union while hypocritically insisting on spending nights at their shared residence. He derided Grace, mocking her perceived idleness and contrasting it with his own toil. Despite Grace's feeble attempts to placate the raging tyrant and profess her love, her words only stoked Robert's fury. Ultimately, he abandoned her, leaving her to grapple with profound loneliness and soul-wrenching anguish. Then, on July 20th, a terse message from Robert pierced the silence. "I want you to leave me alone. I can't stand the thought of you sleeping in my house. I despise you." Yet, less than 24 hours later, on July 21st, a seemingly serene snapshot captured Grace and Robert lying together on the bed in their newly acquired home. Both wore smiles, with Grace seemingly striving to bury the strife of the previous night. Only 7 hours separated this moment of tranquil facade from an impending nightmare. In a cruel twist of fate, within that brief span, Grace Holland's delicate happiness would unravel into an irreversible tragedy. On July 23, 2020, a deceptive tranquility settled over Grace and Robert's tumultuous relationship. It was a deceptive calm before the storm, the ominous quiet before the thunder that would forever alter their lives. At 11:53 p.m., Robert Dios Jr., his voice trembling with anguish, dialed the emergency services. "My fiancée shot herself," he sobbed, his emotions uncontainable. In the ensuing moments, time seemed to slow to a crawl. The wail of ambulance sirens shattered the night's silence as medics rushed into the house. There, they found Grace, lifeless. The clock struck 5:23 a.m., a time forever etched in the protocol as the moment of her passing. Her death, instantaneous, resulted from a gunshot wound to the head. The revelations of Grace Holland's autopsy, unveiled on September 17, 2020, sent shockwaves through those seeking answers. The report painted a stark picture. Grace had indeed shot herself, the bullet's trajectory deviating from the norm, prompting experts to question the official narrative. Yet, the Holland family contended that the investigation was cursory at best. During a brief exchange with detectives at the crime scene, Robert relayed that Grace, grappling with depression exacerbated by the recent loss of their child to miscarriage, succumbed to despair. Initially, Robert's account seemed plausible, but doubts lingered, casting a shadow over the veracity of his testimony. In the living room, Robert was when Grace emerged from the bedroom, seeking a hug before retreating back into the room. Then, a gunshot pierced the air. Rushing to investigate, Robert found Grace lying in the bedroom, a gun nearby, and blood pooling beneath her head. This account was promptly relayed to the medical examiner at 7:25 a.m. However, the Holland family contested this narrative. They alleged that on that very day, Robert, accompanied by his legal counsel, appeared at the Creve-C police station and offered a divergent version of events. In his new statement, Robert claimed that he and Grace were together in the bedroom. She briefly left and then returned to embrace him, mentioning she had to leave for work. As she leaned in to bid him goodbye, the fatal shot rang out. A press release dated January 31, 2024, delves into the enigmatic disappearance of the interview recording between Robert Dios and a detective from Creve-C. Jeffrey Hartman, the city's police chief, acknowledged the existence of the video interview during the investigation. However, he lamented an error in the department's recording system, resulting in the deletion of the crucial footage. This unfortunate turn of events left a veil of uncertainty shrouding the Creve-C Police Department's inquiry into Grace's untimely demise. On August 4, 2020, Detective Char Parker unveiled intriguing revelations. Parker, while tipping off Robert about the impending police visit for evidence collection, subtly suggested the necessity of emphasizing Grace's depression to shape a narrative that would point to an apparent outcome. Significantly, the police honed in on the contents of Robert's phone during their search. Ultimately, after thorough investigation, the detectives concluded that Grace had taken her own life, as per the forensic medical examination's testimony. However, the Holland family remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice. Convinced of Robert's culpability in Grace's demise, they were resolute in their determination to expose the truth. Opting for an alternative route, Grace's family made the decision to enlist the services of a private investigator for an impartial inquiry. They harbored profound reservations regarding the adequacy of the police investigation. Laura, Grace's grieving sister, vocalized her apprehensions regarding apparent irregularities in the investigation. In an online post, she meticulously outlined the evidence and facts that underpinned their belief that the investigation had veered off course. The Holland family voiced their profound disappointment with the police's handling of the case, alleging a glaring oversight in not considering Robert as a suspect, despite numerous indications pointing to his potential involvement. Moreover, they criticized the investigative team for failing to conduct essential tests, such as examining Grace and Robert's hands for gunpowder residue and analyzing Robert's clothing for further evidence. Adding to their frustration, the Holland family lamented the loss of several critical videos by the Crass Police Department, videos that could have illuminated Robert's role in the tragic incident. They expressed dissatisfaction with what they perceived as the Creve-C Police's bias against Robert, highlighting what they saw as a special treatment afforded to him. Notably, they pointed out Robert's lack of concern for Grace following her death, despite being in close proximity to her. Additionally, the family raised concerns about Robert's connections within the investigation circles, implying potential undue influence on the case's trajectory. They asserted that clear indicators of domestic violence had been disregarded, underscoring their frustration at the lack of response to their calls for a more comprehensive investigation. In 2023, the Holland family took their quest for justice to the courtroom, filing a lawsuit for death by negligence against Robert. They accused him of physical abuse, and suggested that his actions either directly caused Grace's death or drove her to take her own life. However, Robert's lawyer staunchly defended his client's innocence, acknowledging certain circumstances but vehemently denying any involvement in Grace's tragic demise. He argued that the family's emotional turmoil might lead them to assign blame where there is none. In December 2023, Officer Hartman from the CVK Police Department sought assistance from the St. Louis County Police Department to reassess the case. The county police agreed, initiating a thorough examination of the details surrounding Grace's death. This renewed investigation gained momentum in January 2024 when police officers visited Robert Dow's residence to provide medical assistance to his new girlfriend, Dr. Sarah Sweeney. While initially classified as a sudden death, the incident remains under investigation, with detectives awaiting the results of a toxicological examination, which could take 4 to 6 weeks to complete. Dr. Sweeney revealed that she battled severe illnesses, including bone disease and allergies, leading to hospitalization in 2021. These conditions posed a risk of fatal anaphylactic shock without immediate treatment. However, Dr. Sweeney always carried an adrenaline shot for emergencies and diligently managed her health, as per her mother. The family opted to await the official autopsy findings before forming any conclusions. In the eyes of the law, Robert Deus remains a suspect, despite the absence of charges in the deaths of Howard and Sweeney. However, the official results of Dr. Sweeney's autopsy could significantly impact the investigation into Grace Holland's case. Following a meticulous reevaluation, the St. Louis County Police discarded the hypothesis that Grace took her own life. The investigation findings were forwarded to the prosecutor's office in early December via the Public Information Department, which subsequently notified Fox News. Presently, the case is classified as death by negligence, though it remains open for potential further action by the prosecutor's office. Chief Jeffrey Hartman of the Creve Court Police affirmed their adherence to the initial conclusion despite lingering doubts and public scrutiny. Nevertheless, the Howard and Sweeney families persist in their quest for closure, eagerly awaiting the autopsy and toxicology results. They are determined to unravel the enigma surrounding Grace Holland's demise, pondering whether it was merely an unfortunate accident or if there lurks something more sinister and obscure beneath the surface of this narrative. On the morning of February 19, 2020, as the first light began to brighten the street and silence settled throughout the city, a man was thoughtfully cleaning his car. Suddenly, loud screams pierced the quiet. His heart raced as he turned to see a nearby car coming to an abrupt stop. In the front seat sat a visibly pale and frightened woman, screaming hysterically, while the man beside her remained calm and composed. The man approached the car. Tension filled the air, ready to explode. Then, a deafening bang echoed through the morning, followed by a flash of light, like lightning tearing through silence. Thick smoke and fire obscured the sky. After what felt like an eternity, he came to his senses amid chaos. He saw a woman engulfed in flames, screaming in agony. Panicking, he grabbed a hose in a desperate attempt to douse the fire, but it continued to spread relentlessly. What was meant to be an ordinary day transformed into a nightmare where flames and fear dominated. What led them to this horrific scenario? When did normality morph into such tragedy? Hannah Clark was a vivacious 31-year-old woman who brought energy to everyone around her. Yet her fate took a dark turn, resulting in irreversible loss that shattered her life. She courageously faced off against a man whose name was once engraved in her heart, but paid an immense price for this confrontation. This tragic event occurred in Camp Hill, located in eastern Brisbane, Australia, a serene town where once vibrant life vanished abruptly, leaving behind only memories of its past vibrancy. Hannah Clark entered the world on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother to 3 children, 2 delightful girls and 1 spirited boy. However, her family faced challenging times. When Aaliyah, 6 years old, Liana, 4, and Trey was just 3, Hannah left an indelible impression of her warmth and cheerful disposition in the hearts of those who loved her. Her entire family remembers her as an exceptionally gentle and kind spirit with a radiant smile that could brighten any room. She dedicated herself entirely to her children, giving them everything they needed. Together with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player from the New Zealand Warriors, they raised their children. Despite a significant age gap between them, their relationship quickly grew deep and strong. Yet Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, never fully trusted Rowan. Hannah chose to ignore her mother's reservations about him. People around Rowan often spoke poorly of him. He had trouble remembering even his 4-digit bank card PIN and neglected to register his car after purchasing it, claiming no one had informed him about the necessity of such formalities. Hannah's parents were burdened with despair. Confronted with this difficult situation, they realized that interfering in Hannah's relationship with Rowan might lead to them losing their bond with her altogether. Their hearts were heavy, but they decided not to fight against it to preserve their cherished connection, the love and trust of their daughter. Sue had concerns about Rowan from the beginning. She sensed something amiss about him. He appeared arrogant and self-centered. The considerable age difference troubled her as well. When they met, Hannah had just graduated, while Rowan was already an adult at 31 years old. The fact that he hadn't finalized his divorce when they first began dating added to their worries. When presented with this situation upon meeting Rowan for the first time, Hannah's parents inquired about his ex-wife's circumstances. Rowan explained he still lived with her due to obligations towards his son. Eventually, though, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued pursuing a relationship with Hannah despite initial concerns from those closest to her. In 2011, he proposed to her, and Hannah yes. A year later, they married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia. They had 3 children together. The eldest daughter, Aaliyah, was quick-witted and inherited the best qualities from her mother, according to her grandmother's stories. Liana, the middle daughter, was a charming child who aspired to be the center of attention and always pleased those around her. The youngest child was Trey, perhaps the most beloved. Hannah adored him. He also showed athletic talent, which brought great joy to his parents who were involved in sports. Rowan was a former professional athlete who loved working out at the gym. He had impressive muscles, though their origin was not related to hard work, but to steroids use. This led to a mental disorder for him. Like Hannah, Rowan worked as a personal trainer, though their methods differed greatly. Clients loved Hannah for her kindness and caring nature. Because of this, she had many regular customers. Rowan's approach as a trainer was fundamentally different. His inappropriate and aggressive behavior, caused by steroids, made him unsuitable as a trainer. For example, he would call clients fat and clumsy on social media and often insult women during training sessions. Rowan faced difficulties in communicating with people, which affected his career and financial situation significantly. Hannah had to take on the role of breadwinner in the family. This only irritated Rowan even more because he felt humiliated that his wife was doing a better job than he was. Despite financial difficulties, they decided to open their own fitness club together. In between training sessions, they both worked part-time at a sports store, a decision made by Rowan so he could control Hannah's every move and know her whereabouts always. Their story is marked by contrast. While one shone through kindness and empathy, the other struggled with aggression and challenges in communication. However, his conduct in the store mirrored his behavior in the gyms where he previously worked. It seemed that Baxter consistently sought to display his superiority over women. During a personal training session with Sue, Hannah's mother, Rowan revealed a more malicious side. Instead of demonstrating the expected respect for the club owner and his mother-in-law, he acted inappropriately. During the session, Rowan deliberately caused Sue to fall. She struck her head on the floor and began to bleed. In such circumstances, any reasonable person would have apologized and promptly assisted her. But Rowan was different. He not only showed no empathy, but also laughed cynically at Sue and made sarcastic remarks about her clumsiness throughout the remainder of the training. Despite this incident and their own reservations, Hannah's parents endeavored to accept Rowan for their daughter's sake. Personal training sessions with Baxter became torturous for clients. Insults like fat and lazy, were frequently directed at them. At home, his tyranny extended to Hannah and their children. Over time, his insults grew more cutting. He punished Hannah for any misbehavior, anything that displeased him. He forbade the children from seeing Sue, their grandmother, and prohibited Hannah from communicating with her brother. Hannah found herself isolated and severed from family and friends. Rowan exercised absolute control over her life, including taking away her clients and dictating who she could see and when. Gradually, she became akin to a prisoner within her own home. Each day, Rowan demanded intimacy from Hannah. Any refusal provoked his anger, which he then directed at her and the children. After coercing her into compliance, he would smile insincerely and offer a false apology, attributing it to an outburst of passion. In isolation and under constant control and cruelty, Hannah's spirit began to diminish. Rowan's tyranny was affecting both her life and those of her children adversely. The marriage that once thrived on love had devolved into a living nightmare for them all. Hannah lived under immense fear, imprisoned by unseen but potent bonds. Rowan, a tyrant and a brute, sought her obedience through threats and violence. His words pierced her heart like venomous thorns. "If you don't obey, I will hurt you." The specter of his wrath haunted the house, tainting each day. Hannah's environment was a cage of prohibitions put up by her husband. Wearing short shorts or bright colors, symbols of freedom and self-expression, was strictly forbidden to her. Rowan could not bear for his wife, whom he considered his property, to attract attention. He believed her place was in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Hannah did not dare to defy him. Any attempt at self-expression aroused his fury and rage. The insults and bullying extended beyond just Hannah. Rowan often directed undue harshness towards the children. While playful games among parents and children are common, Rowan frequently crossed all boundaries, inflicting intentional harm on them. When they cried out in pain, he mocked them, showing no regard for their feelings. Once, a playful fight with Aaliyah escalated into tragedy. Rowan miscalculated his strength and deliberately pushed the girl. She hit her head severely. The injury was deep enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of consoling his daughter and apologizing for his aggression, Rowan blamed Aaliyah. This wasn't the only form of torment he inflicted on his children. As an athlete accustomed to ice baths post-training, a standard regimen for adults, Rowan forced even little Trey to endure the icy water despite their pleas and tears. He even posted photos and videos of them on social media with captions like, "Even my kids take ice baths." Remarkably perceptive despite their youth, the children understood their predicament well. Aaliyah, the eldest daughter known for her quick wit and resilience, often argued with Rowan and tried to resist his tyranny. Whenever she overheard her parents arguing, she intervened in an effort to shield her mother from Rowan's ire. Feeling suffocated by Rowan's oppressive control, like a stranglehold on her soul, Hannah recognized that the toxic atmosphere was harming not just herself, but also the children profoundly. She decided to take a critical step. Confronting her husband head-on, despite knowing his cruel tendencies well, she understood that he might use the children against her in his ruthless mannerisms. Hannah did not believe he was capable of physically harming them. However, the fear of being denied the chance to see them tormented her greatly. She was a dedicated mother, willing to do anything for her children, yet she felt trapped. A single misstep could result in losing the most precious thing, the bond with her beloved children. In that same year, Hannah experienced a life-altering event. Rowan developed an interest in jiu-jitsu. One day, after returning from training fueled by adrenaline, he unexpectedly attacked Hannah. His hands tightened around her throat, and chilling words escaped his mouth. Overwhelmed by fear, Hannah did not immediately recognize herself as a victim of domestic violence. This assault was far more terrifying than anything she had previously endured. In the aftermath, Hannah resolved to leave Rowan Baxter at the earliest opportunity. When she contacted the police, she detailed the horrors she had endured. The responding officer informed her that coerced intimacy without consent constitutes domestic violence. This conversation was pivotal for Hannah. It opened her eyes and motivated her to take immediate action. She took her children and sought refuge at her parents' home, determined to escape the nightmare that shadowed them. By early November 2019, their relationship had not yet legally concluded in divorce. During this period, Hannah decided to allow Rowan some time with their children, despite having little control over the situation without court intervention. Nonetheless, she understood that trusting Rowan with the children was precarious at best. Rowan struggled with his emotions and perhaps sought solace by consulting Pastor Christopher Ans from his church. Christopher, known for his kindness and willingness to listen, provided Rowan with support and counsel during this challenging time. Over time, Christopher began to observe unsettling characteristics in Rowan. He noticed Rowan's desire for dominance and control. In moments of vulnerability, Rowan confided in Christopher, admitting his awareness of the illegality of his actions and his need for assistance. However, he had no idea how to remedy the situation. This confession marked the initial step towards reformation. Christopher's support and wise advice could have been beneficial on this challenging path, but it did not transpire. One day, Hannah and her children were walking quietly down the street when, without warning, a terrible event occurred. Rowan suddenly appeared, seized Liana, their middle daughter, and disappeared. Hannah's world fell apart. Intense anxiety and fear for her daughter's safety overwhelmed her. For 2 days, she was unable to locate Liana and had no knowledge of her whereabouts. The growing anxiety became unbearable torture. Eventually, Hannah sought assistance from the police. The officers conducted a thorough search and fortunately located Liana with her father. The girl was found alive and unharmed, although the experience left an indelible mark on her psyche. Recognizing the imminent danger to Hannah and her children, the police strongly recommended she file a formal report against him and obtain a protection order. However, Hannah, paralyzed by grief and fear, was not able to take this crucial step. Despite the numerous issues caused by Rowan, he was unfortunately still awarded joint custody of the children. This legal leverage enabled him to persist in his abuse of Hannah. Following another visitation with their father, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. Before departing, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying photographs of her in her underwear near his car where their children could see them. Overcome with anger, Hannah tried to retrieve these photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and struck her in the face, resulting in a split lip. It remains unknown how severe this assault might have become if Sue, Hannah's mother, had not intervened promptly to assist her daughter. In response to intervention and shouting insults, Baxter drove away hastily. Hannah, gripped by shock and despair, went to the police because this attack clearly violated her protection order. Sadly, the authorities didn't act swiftly, which resulted in a heartbreaking tragedy. The day started out as usual and seemed like it would just be another working day. But there was an underlying sense of destiny. On February 19, 2020, clutching her car keys with hopes of a peaceful morning, Hannah left her parents' house to take her 3 children to school and kindergarten. Yet fate had other intentions. Minute by minute, moment by moment, disaster loomed over Hannah and her children's lives. Like a magnet drawing them inescapably into darkness, they were pulled towards it. When Hannah got into the car with her children, Baxter unexpectedly climbed in as well. Fear gripped Hannah for herself and her children. She pleaded with Rowan to leave them alone, but his unchecked rage filled the air with threats and demands for Hannah to start driving. Not wanting to escalate the situation, she obeyed. As Hannah turned onto Raven Street, she noticed a man cleaning his car nearby. In what seemed an ordinary moment, fate took a sudden turn towards catastrophe. Desperate for vengeance, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the seat and doused Hannah and her children with it. Michael Zach was an accidental witness to this scene. He later recounted hearing the sound of a car pulling up to his house that morning. Panicked, Hannah screamed for help at him. She begged that Rowan wanted to kill her and had covered them all in gasoline. Rowan, holding tightly to Hannah, didn't let her go for a moment. His desperate cries for help got lost in a storm of silent madness. Michael approached the car from the passenger side and encountered a harrowing sight. Rowan's blank expression and the lighter he held. In an instant, flames engulfed the vehicle, a burst so intense it chilled the blood. Screams echoed, ears ringing, and then there was silence. The explosion left Michael stunned, disoriented, and pulled him out of reality itself. When he regained awareness, he was initially unsure of his surroundings or what had transpired. All around him lay chaos. The acrid smell of burnt metal and gasoline filled the air. Flames ravaged the car, reducing it to charred remains. Amazingly, Hannah managed to escape the blaze, scorched and bloody but alive. She screamed frantically, "My children! Where are my children?" Pleas for help poured out, not for herself, but for her children, still in danger within the burning inferno. As if answering her desperate cries, a passing car stopped. A doctor, off duty but compelled by conscience, rushed towards her. Upon reaching Hannah, he heard her anguished cry, "My children, they're there. Why didn't I stay with them?" That single phrase captured all her world's pain and despair. She was torn apart by regret and self-recrimination for surviving when her children did not. With professional composure and urgency, the doctor endeavored to assist amid the turmoil surrounding them both. Michael didn't hesitate for a second. Grabbing the hose at his house, he began pouring water over the burning car. The fire was ruthless, though. It consumed the entire vehicle with no hope of saving the children. Both the doctor and Michael started shouting for Hannah to duck and hide to put out the fire, but in her grief, she didn't hear them. "My children! Where are my children?" she cried out, her words filled with desperation and madness. In those first terrible moments after the explosion, Michael didn't notice the children inside. It was hard for him to believe Hannah would put them in such danger. Only later, when her screams finally made sense to him, did his heart fill with chilling horror. He raced toward the car to rescue them, but the flames were too fierce, the heat unbearable. All efforts were futile. Hannah lay on the road, her body scorched by fire, repeatedly saying, "My children, someone save my children." No one yet grasped the tragedy's full scale. Burns covered more than 97% of her body. Only her feet remained untouched, the only unaffected place on her severely burned body. Despite unimaginable pain, Hannah couldn't stop thinking about her unprotected children. Indeed, those who had always said Hannah was selfless were proven right. The police looked at her burned body and knew survival chances were slim. Yet Hannah did not accept that fate easily. A courageous fire in her heart allowed her to summon every last bit of strength to give a testimony to police officers, a final gesture before facing an awful death. Officer Angus Kay wrote down every word she managed to say. Through pain and despair, she tried describing events that led up to her tragedy. Hannah, struggling to move her lips, identified her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the individual responsible and relayed all the details. Her voice grew softer by the minute, and her frail body weakened further. Officer Key stayed by her side throughout. He commended her for her bravery and reassured her that she had already contributed significantly and everything would be all right. His actions would later receive high praise from the authorities. His professionalism was crucial in gathering materials that became key to a verdict. Even in her final moments, Hannah didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about previous threats from Rowan, she denied any such instances. Doctors came to alleviate her pain, but she could no longer speak. Amidst all this chaos, Rowan Baxter behaved oddly. Despite burns covering 80% of his body, he exited the car on his own. While Hannah pleaded for her children's safety, he sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After some time, Rowan, seemingly possessed, climbed back into the car engulfed in flames. One of the bystanders, risking his own life, attempted to extinguish the fire at the rear of the vehicle. At that moment, Rowan retrieved a knife from inside the car and drove people away from it, preventing them from extinguishing the blaze. The children, trapped in a dire situation of steel and flames, had virtually no chance of survival. Nonetheless, onlookers did not cease their efforts to rescue them. Rowan's actions kept everyone at bay, effectively sentencing his children to a painful demise. What drove him? Was it a desperate attempt to shield them from an inevitable fate or an act of madness clouded by selfishness? One witness made an effort to reason with Rowan, pleading for him to drop the knife and allow a chance for the children's rescue. However, Rowan was unresponsive. As the children perished and Hannah succumbed before his eyes, Baxter turned the knife on himself. His selfish act eradicated any remaining hope for everyone involved. The children died. Hannah followed shortly thereafter, and Rowan's motives remained shrouded in mystery. At this tragic scene, a senior doctor noted Hannah's valor. Observing her wounds, which were clearly fatal, he saw only her concern for the children's welfare and a desire to convey the truth in her eyes. Hannah Clarke passed away at the hospital on the very same day of her admission. Only 31 years old, she was a tragic of severe domestic violence, along with her children. Despite facing immense danger, Hannah tirelessly fought to protect her family from an abusive individual. Her courageous efforts, although ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated her steadfast resolve. Each day, she exhibited remarkable bravery, putting her loved one's safety above all else. Through her relentless effort to confront her harrowing circumstances, she ensured that her story would endure. On March 9, 2020, Hannah was laid to rest alongside her children. This event deeply affected the Clarke family. In their grief, they decided to establish the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation with the mission of ending domestic violence in Australia. Just 4 days after this heart-wrenching event, thousands gathered to bid farewell to Hannah and her children. Hannah's memory will live on in Camp Hill through Hannah's House, where new trees were planted and a plaque installed recounting her life story. Through these initiatives and remembrances, Hannah's legacy persists for future generations to honor and remember. In December 2020, Hannah Clarke was recognized as the Woman of the Year by Marie Claire. This honor celebrated her courage in battling domestic violence. Yet her story continues beyond this recognition. Although Baxter is no longer alive, police have not closed the case. Their aim now is to delve into his motives to prevent similar tragic events from happening again. Those who knew Rowan describe him as egocentric and violent. Nicole, a friend of Hannah's, expressed her strong frustration. She spoke to the police, criticizing their inaction and negligence. Why wasn't help given to Hannah? Why were the children not saved? These questions remain unanswered for now, but one thing is evident. Rowan Baxter's selfishness led to a devastating tragedy. It left behind only grief and unresolved questions that will haunt many. Hannah's mother shared harrowing details of what her daughter suffered due to Baxter's influence. She recalled an incident at the gym where Rowan intentionally dropped Hannah on the floor, highlighting his aggressive nature further. A pastor who conversed with Baxter also noted his controlling tendencies and lack of empathy toward others. Pain. On January 26, 2020, investigators discovered a note left by Baxter just before the tragic incident. In this note, Baxter expressed that he considered himself a victim. He wrote, "I can't take this anymore. She must understand how hard it is to not have to see my own children. My life is ruined." Notably, Baxter signed the note on his own behalf and seemingly on behalf of the children. This detail underscores his perception of himself as a victim and his accusation against Hannah for ruining his life. The content of this note made Baxter's intentions evident. It appears he may have had plans to kidnap the children and retaliate against Hannah. During the court hearing, it was revealed that a week before the tragedy, on February 13, 2020, Hannah had alerted her friends about potential danger from Baxter. Her friend, Nicole Brooks, contacted the police on her behalf to warn them that Hannah and her children were at risk. Regrettably, the police did not take these concerns seriously, stating there was no specific threat they could act upon. Despite Nicole's persistent efforts, her warnings went unheeded. This situation exemplifies how inadequate laws to protect women from domestic violence can result in tragedy. Had stricter regulations been in place, perhaps the authorities could have responded more swiftly and effectively, potentially preventing the loss of Hannah and her children's lives. Megan Newton, born in 2001 to Michael and Sarah, also had a stepsister named Demi. However, Meghan primarily spent her time alongside her mother Sarah, forging an incredibly tight-knit bond akin to best friends. Meghan kept no secrets from her mother, while Sarah, in return, would often consult her daughter, who displayed wisdom beyond her years on various significant issues. The woman characterized her daughter as highly ambitious, dynamic, and affable. Meghan's friends described her as someone with an excellent sense of humor, compassionate, and thoughtful. Her grandparents remarked that she possessed a golden heart from a young age, always prepared to lend a hand to others. In her elementary school days, Meghan encountered a new classmate, a girl whose family had recently relocated to England from China. The girl faced significant challenges in understanding the curriculum and interacting with peers due to her lack of English proficiency. Consequently, the teacher placed her beside Newton, hoping the compassionate and helpful Meghan would assist the newcomer. Meghan embraced this role wholeheartedly, overcoming the language barrier to aid her classmate and adjusting to a new environment. By the time the girl moved back to China, she had achieved a respectable level of English proficiency. Meghan's kindness and open-mindedness persisted into her teenage years and adulthood, finding expression in her passion for sports. Soccer, in particular, captured her heart, leading her to join the Stoke-on-Trent women's soccer team. Additionally, she engaged in coaching, dedicating her weekends to training young girls under 7 years old instead of resting, striving for her Level 1 coaching badge. Meghan aspired to secure a sports scholarship in the USA. Her commitment to sports, especially soccer, was so profound that she chose to pursue a career in it, even getting a small tattoo of a soccer cleat to express her love for the game. Upon completing her schooling, Meghan embarked on her college journey, aiming to pursue her passion further. Meghan Newton, a promising student aspiring to become a sports therapist or physiotherapist, was the first in her family to attend a tertiary education institution. Despite her potential for a bright future, her dreams were tragically cut short in the spring of 2019. Meghan led a busy life, balancing 3 part-time jobs. On April 19th, a seemingly ordinary day, she finished work at a local fish and chip shop and headed home around 10:20 p.m. Living independently in her own apartment, Meghan enjoyed her newfound autonomy. After getting ready, she joined friends for a night out at a club in Hanley, where they danced and had drinks. By Saturday morning, a grim discovery was made in her apartment: Meghan's lifeless body, naked and covered in blood, a victim of a brutal stabbing. This horrific event deeply affected the community, who remembered Meghan as a vibrant and charming young woman. The apartment paperwork and IDs conclusively identified the deceased as Meghan Newton, a young woman who was brutally murdered in her bedroom. Meghan's family was promptly notified by the police upon their arrival, and they had to face the heartbreaking task of identifying their daughter at the morgue. Meghan, whom they had cared for with great love and recently allowed to live independently, met a tragic end that they never could have imagined, even in their worst nightmares. The crime scene was immediately secured, and forensic experts were sent to Meghan's apartment to collect any potential evidence. The autopsy revealed the horrifying extent of the attack on Meghan. She was strangled first, losing consciousness due to the lack of oxygen, and then she received 9 stab wounds to her back that punctured both her lungs. Furthermore, it was clear that she had been sexually assaulted. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Meghan, was found nearby. The forensic pathologist concluded that it was these stab wounds that led to Meghan Newton's untimely death. The bloodied knife and apartment keys were sent to the lab in the hope that DNA analysis could identify the assailant. It was believed that the culprit had accidentally dropped the keys while leaving Meghan's apartment after the murder. The investigation began with detectives reconstructing the events leading up the tragic incident by talking to Meghan's friends and family. It was determined that Meghan had spent the evening at a club before taking a taxi home in the early hours of the morning. The investigative team reviewed surveillance footage from the area around the nightclub and the route Meghan took to get home. effort to trace her final movements and possibly pinpoint the assailant drew their attention to footage showing Meghan boarding a taxi accompanied by a friend and an unidentified young man, raising questions about this individual's identity and potential role in the crime. Subsequent video from within Meghan's apartment complex showed the same young man again, this time within the premises. Luckily, a camera positioned in the common hallway offered a clear view of the entrance to Meghan's apartment, allowing officers to monitor who came and went that night. The goal was to identify the murderer by scrutinizing the video recordings from the evening of the incident. At approximately 3:44 a.m., Meghan was seen entering her apartment building's lobby with the same young man she had shared a taxi ride with around an hour before. They proceeded together towards her apartment, with Meghan appearing cheerful and exhibiting no signs of apprehension or unease around the individual. Upon reaching her door, Meghan used her keys to unlock it, and they both went inside. However, a particular moment caught the detective's attention. While Meghan was unlocking the door, the young man stood behind her, scanning the area and even making eye contact with the camera lens at one point. This behavior immediately raised suspicions among the police. They pondered whether the young man had premeditated harming Meghan, possibly after coercing her into sexual acts, and was checking for potential witnesses. Further scrutiny of the video footage from the remainder of the night revealed a disturbing fact. Only the young man exited the apartment the following morning around 5:54 a.m. He attempted to leave the building but realized he needed a special key fob to do so. He returned to Meghan's apartment, momentarily retrieved the keys, and eventually managed to exit the building. The external surveillance captured him discarding an object where the blood-stained apartment keys would later be discovered by a neighbor. The most damning evidence of his involvement in Meghan's death was obtained from another surveillance camera, which showed him walking away from the scene, inspecting one of his hands that appeared to be covered in blood. This critical piece of evidence marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. Identifying the young man as Joseph Trevor was swift due to a recent run-in with the law just the day before the tragic event. He had been arrested for possessing ketamine, a substance used both medically and in veterinary settings as an anesthetic and sometimes for pain management. The police officer who had apprehended Trevor immediately recognized him in the surveillance footage. Trevor, 18, hailed from a reputable family deeply rooted in the law enforcement community, with both his father and mother serving as police officers. He resided in a neighboring district and had a long-standing acquaintance with Meghan Newton, as they had been high school classmates. Joseph led a seemingly typical life. He was academically successful and shared Meghan's passion for sports, excelling in soccer to the extent of playing professionally for Newcastle Town and securing a sports scholarship in America with plans to relocate there after completing his studies. Like Meghan, Joseph was pursuing higher education in Newcastle, poised for a promising future. To many who knew him, Trevor was perceived as a kind, affable, and sociable individual. Yet he harbored a less visible, volatile side to his character, capable of shifting from a jovial and engaging demeanor to one that was reclusive, brusque, and abrupt without any discernible trigger. This unpredictability left acquaintances unsure of which version of Joseph they would encounter on any given day. When the detectives in the Meghan Newton case began to look more closely at Trevor's background, they came across some very unpleasant information about his past. Approximately 3 years earlier, at age 15, he was suspected of abusing another teenage girl because the attempt at intimate contact failed. He was not charged or punished. However, everyone around the school knew about the incident. After this incident, classmates at the school began to call Trevor a predator and child molester since the public arrest at the school could not go unnoticed. Now, for the police, this information became a warning because Meghan was also subjected to forced sexual intercourse that night. Joseph Trevor was identified as the primary suspect in the assault case. Investigators focused on his movements that night. They already knew from surveillance footage that he was near the nightclub and got into the same taxi as Megan, later heading to her apartment with her. Detectives were unsure what Joseph Trevor did before arriving at Newton's home. They discovered that Joseph attended a party with school friends the previous evening. Coincidentally, they ended up in the same bar as Newton. Since they knew each other from school, they greeted each other and continued to enjoy their time separately. However, Joseph didn't stay long at the nightclub. Security noticed he had a packet of white powder and called the police. The squad that arrived detained Joseph and took him to the nearby police department. Despite his parents being in law enforcement, Joseph faced no legal repercussions. The officers unlocked his cuffs, seized the ketamine, and let him go, advising him to return home and avoid further drug use. Ignoring their advice, Joseph returned to the club where Megan was. He was denied entry, and around 2:40 a.m., he met Megan by the taxi queue. He shared his recent ordeal at the police station and his concern about facing his parents. Megan, always compassionate, let Joseph borrow her phone to contact a friend, but he couldn't find a place to stay. Seeing his distress, Megan invited Joseph to stay on her living room sofa. In the morning, once sober, he could decide how to approach his parents. Trevor gratefully agreed to Megan's offer, which explains why surveillance footage showed him entering a cab with Megan and her companion. He messaged his dad, falsely claiming he'd spend the night at a friend's place. The cab first dropped off Megan's companion before taking Megan and Trevor to her apartment on Fletcher Road. Surveillance recorded them entering the building and later captured Trevor discarding stained keys in the yard. Authorities believe that during those few hours, Trevor violently assaulted Megan, leading to her death. The evidence was clear, leaving Trevor with no way to dispute the accusations. Law enforcement was ready to apprehend him, and astonishingly, Trevor had already informed his parents about his role in Megan's death. After leaving the apartment just before dawn, Trevor went to a bridge over the A500 in Stoke-on-Trent. Sitting on the barrier with his legs hanging over, he seemed to be considering jumping. He perhaps sought an escape from the consequences of his deeds, contemplating suicide. Trevor had a history of depression and prior suicide attempts, and had been seen on this bridge before. A bystander noticed Trevor and promptly alerted the authorities. They arrived quickly and transported him to the hospital for a psychiatric assessment. After evaluation, medical professionals deemed it safe for him to be discharged, and he returned home under the watchful eye of his father. Joseph revealed the whole truth to his mother. He could no longer carry the weight of his actions and was wary of the inevitable consequences of his deeds. After gathering his thoughts, he approached his mother and confessed his involvement in Megan Newton's death with the simple statement, "I did something bad." He also shared these confessions with a few of his friends, possibly driven by or other emotions, to admit to actions that couldn't be undone. Once Joseph's mother heard his admission, she quickly contacted the authorities to report his confession. However, by that time, the investigative team had already identified Joseph Trevor as their prime suspect through surveillance footage and were coordinating his arrest. The young man was taken to the police station for questioning, where he acknowledged being at Megan's residence that night, but couldn't provide details about the brutal attack. His account was consistent with surveillance footage showing their entry into her apartment. She had kindly offered him the couch for the night. Trevor claimed that their physical interaction was consensual and that after their intimacy, he blacked out. He had no memory of the subsequent events and couldn't clarify the specifics of the incident or his motivations. The only memory he retained from that night was Megan's apology. At 15, Trevor had also faced allegations of harassing a peer. He was ridiculed by his classmates, who labeled him with various derogatory terms. Some branded him a predator and charmer, and among them, Newton allegedly tagged him as Rolf Harris. According to Trevor's account, Ralph Harris, a famed Australian TV host, musician, and painter, was convicted of child abuse and other sexual offenses. These monikers deeply wounded Joseph throughout his youth. He endeavored to erase these bitter memories. Over time, Meghan's apology for the schoolyard taunts abruptly revived these painful recollections, propelling him into a fit of anger. In that instant, he purportedly seized a knife. Nonetheless, the detectives dismissed his account, skeptical of his conveniently lapsing memory at a pivotal juncture. The law enforcement officers were persuaded that he was fully cognizant of his actions throughout. It's likely that Meghan merely turned him away that evening. She offered him a place to stay out of friendship, recognizing his troublesome situation. Having known each other for years, attending the same school and now the same college, they shared numerous interests and aspirations for the future. Their mutual enthusiasm for soccer might have led her to believe it was safe to share her space with him overnight. Upon returning to the apartment, Joseph attempted to escalate their interaction to a more intimate level. Meghan was not receptive and declined. This deeply frustrated Trevor, especially under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Disregarding her objections, he chose to use force in an effort to eliminate the risk of her reporting the incident. He decided to take drastic measures to ensure her silence permanently. Shortly after Meghan Newton's tragic passing, Joseph Trevor faced charges for intentionally ending the life of his fellow student, along with committing 2 acts of sexual violence. The assault was discovered to have occurred in a manner involving multiple attacks. He was apprehended at his residence, and after several months the legal proceedings commenced, despite his initial partial admission. Joseph first refused to admit guilt, but later he changed his story. He acknowledged causing Meghan's death, though he insisted the relations that night were consensual. He maintained this stance until the trial commenced on February 17, 2020. At the start of trial, he suddenly shifted his plea to guilty on all counts. This move seemed aimed at avoiding a lengthy trial, perhaps expecting that the jury would quickly dismiss his defense. As a result, Joseph received a life imprisonment sentence with eligibility for parole after a minimum of 21 years and 65 days. A dramatic moment unfolded in court when Trevor, during sentencing's conclusion, turned towards Sarah, Meghan's mother, and silently mouthed, "Sorry." This action deeply infuriated her. Apologies at this juncture were meaningless and could neither amend the past nor alleviate the prolonged suffering Meghan's family endured while awaiting trial. His belated apology appeared as an additional insult to the grieving mother. No apology could bring back Sarah's daughter or negate Joseph's heinous actions that night. The indifference Trevor displayed in surveillance footage post-incident, showing him nonchalantly leaving Meghan's residence, underscored his lack of remorse. The irreversible harm inflicted on Meghan and her family robbed them of future joys and milestones, leaving them burdened with lifelong sorrow. Meghan's closest friend, Ricardo Eccles, shared that they had plans to shop in Manchester the day after her passing. He was heartbroken upon learning of his friend's sudden loss and spent days in shock. However, in honor of Meghan, he gathered himself and initiated a fundraising effort to assist with Newton family's funeral costs. His efforts successfully raised several thousand British pounds, which were handed over to Meghan's mother. Meghan had always been a pillar of support for those in distress. Now it was time for her supporters to reciprocate by providing emotional support and assistance to her family and all who cherished her brief yet impactful life. A fervent supporter of Stoke City Football Club, Meghan was remembered by the team's players and passionate supporters who dedicated a minute of applause during a game in her honor. Her family and friends also collected funds to set up a commemorative bench in her memory at a serene park in Stoke-on-Trent. This bench overlooks a scenic pond and playground suitable for football, a tribute fitting for someone so interconnected with her community and beloved by all who knew her. Georgina Kruger was born on April 11, 1992 in Munich. Georgina, often called Jorodzina, was the middle child in a simple household. She had an older brother named Tommy, who was 8 years her senior, and a younger sister named Michelle, who was 2.5 years younger. When Georgina turned 11, her parents decided to divorce. Tommy then chose to live with their father at age 19. After the separation, Jorodzina and Michelle were primarily raised by their mother, Svea, and maternal grandmother. Both girls excelled academically and participated in music and dance activities, displaying distinct creativity. The family lived modestly. Although their father stayed in touch with his ex-wife and daughters, his focus largely remained on supporting his elder son through educational pursuits and other endeavors. In June 2006, Svea relocated with her mother and daughters to Berlin after securing a well-paying job there. They moved into Moabit district at house number 8 on Stendal Street. On September 1st that year, both sisters enrolled at one of the best local schools accessible by bus, despite being situated in another district. Svea adapted well to her new job and had ambitious plans for their future until unforeseen events disrupted their peaceful existence abruptly. From an early age, Jorodzina harbored a dream of becoming an actress. She loved to sing and dance, dedicating herself wholeheartedly and taking these pursuits very seriously. Inspired by Indian films, she envisioned a career in acting and enthusiastically participated in school theater, attending acting and stage speech courses. Her teachers recognized her talent, forecasting future success and fame for her. Furthermore, Jorodzina possessed a bright, expressive appearance, characterized by a slender feminine figure and notable height for her age. She meticulously cared for herself, keeping abreast of fashion trends and striving to dress stylishly. Jorodzina skillfully applied decorative cosmetics, remarkably well, akin to professional makeup artists. Often back in Munich, she would apply makeup for friends and neighbors with precision. During the summer holidays in Berlin, Jorodzina actively attended various casting calls in attempts to make her breakthrough onto the big screen or television. Though she managed to appear in crowd scenes several times, these roles were quite minor. However, on Friday, September 22, 2006, fortune finally favored her. Jorodzina auditioned for a guest role in the television series Turkish for Beginners, and her candidacy was approved. She was scheduled to receive a callback on Monday, September 25th, to finalize her inclusion in the cast. This callback was set to discuss further details and extend an invitation for contract signing. Jorodzina, the new beauty in town, made a noticeable impact from her very first day at her new school. She immediately captured the attention of all the boys her class. However, when it came to interacting with the girls, she faced significant challenges. They openly envied her and saw her as a competitor. As a result, her classmates were slow to welcome her into their group and often communicated with her reluctantly. Despite these obstacles, Jorodzina remained sociable, friendly, and approachable. She avoided conflicts and tried hard to interact with everyone in the class. This teenage girl wasn't just beautiful. She danced well, sang wonderfully, and even received an offer from a modeling agency to become a photo model. She agreed to the offer, but unfortunately missed the planned photo session scheduled for early October. Jorodzina harbored dreams of making it big in Hollywood or Bollywood one day. She envisioned herself walking on the red carpets of prestigious film festivals amidst celebrities, dreaming of fame, recognition, and film awards. To achieve these aspirations, she was prepared to work diligently on herself. Just as these dreams seemed within reach, Jorodzina suddenly disappeared without a trace, a few miles from home. At that time, she was awaiting confirmation for a role in a TV series and had no doubts about securing it. Throughout that weekend, Jorodzina could think of nothing else but the anticipated call from the studio that would decide her future. She was filled with excitement and inspiration, already imagining herself on set, preparing for her lines. On Monday morning, September 25th, as usual, she headed to school. She was expected back home by 2 p.m., and since the call was expected later that afternoon, Jorodzina asked her grandmother to answer all calls in her absence. The day felt endlessly long for Kruger. Jorodzina's classmates noticed she kept checking the time and seemed unable to focus on her lessons. Given that she had told no one about her casting opportunity, everyone interpreted her anxious state differently. After school ended for the day, Jorodzina gathered her belongings swiftly and rushed to the nearest bus stop. She boarded bus number 27, which she rode daily, and headed towards home. After traveling 3 stops, she got off at Rue Rov, not far from where she lived. Georgina Kruger never made it home. Vanishing somewhere halfway from the bus stop to her apartment, she was never seen again, neither alive nor deceased. By 2 in the afternoon, her grandmother, who was waiting for Georgina and her sister, had prepared lunch and set the table. Georgina was expected first, with Michelle arriving a bit later due to extra classes at music school. It was strange when Georgina did not show up because she had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3, the grandmother grew anxious and began calling Georgina, only to find her phone turned off. Subsequent attempts also failed. Anxiety grew further as more time passed. When Georgina's mother returned from work and learned about her daughter's disappearance and unreachable mobile phone, she immediately sensed that something serious had occurred. The first step was contacting the school, where it was confirmed that Georgina had attended all her classes and left by bus as usual. The mother then reached out to several of Georgina's friends, hoping that she might have been delayed talking or stopping at a cafe on her way home. However, all friends confirmed that Georgina appeared in a hurry and headed straight home. Increasingly concerned, they proceeded to the police station and reported the disappearance of the 14-year-old girl. Initially skeptical, law enforcement suspected that Georgina might have gone on a date or visited friends or perhaps argued with a classmate and was sulking alone somewhere. Exhausting all possible scenarios and verifying that the teenager wasn't found in any anticipated locations, detectives then began checking accident reports and calling hospitals, assuming she might have encountered trouble on her way home from school. Yet there were no hospital records for Georgina either. As night approached, extensive searches and witness interviews commenced. It turned out that the last sighting of Georgina was at the bus stop. When she got off the bus and turned the street leading to her home, the schoolgirl was dressed in blue jeans with wear marks, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers. She carried a pink sports bag with a long, wide strap containing her notebooks, textbooks, and mobile phone. Investigators tracked the girl's movements through her device's signal. She spent the entire day at school, then boarded the bus and got off at her stop. However, approximately halfway to her home, the signal suddenly vanished and never reappeared. The search began on Stendhal Street, where the Kruger family lived. A search team with dogs trained to detect both living and deceased humans was dispatched there. At that point, there was still hope of finding the teenage girl alive and unharmed. Law enforcement checked every home, interviewed all residents and potential witnesses, inspected attics and basements, and spoke with workers at local stores and cafes. No one had seen Georgina. Even dogs couldn't pick up her trail. By the next morning, flyers with the schoolgirl's photo and requests for any information about her were posted all over the city. Dozens of calls came into the police station, reporting sightings of a similarly looking girl in different parts of the city. Unfortunately, all leads turned out to be false. Investigators also began to follow up on all previously convicted local residents, as well as those released on bail. Special attention was given to criminals who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, all these efforts yielded no results. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air, not making it home. No traces or personal belongings found, as if she had never existed at all. After several months of fruitless searching, the investigation was suspended due to lack of leads, not a single clue, and no direction left to pursue. About a year after Georgina disappeared, someone called the police anonymously. The caller said her body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Law enforcement couldn't figure out who made the call, but they decided to check it out anyway. For weeks, skilled divers went through the lake with advanced equipment. They were thorough, examining almost every inch of the lake bed. They found nothing. It was a false lead. Despite this, it got the public interested in the case again. The media began discussing and writing about Georgina's disappearance once more. So another search operation was set up. The police talked to neighbors again and brought in search dogs, although hopes were low since the dogs had not picked up her scent on the day she vanished. A year later, investigators were fairly sure Georgina was no longer alive. However, her family didn't believe it. Her mother made up a story for herself that her daughter had run away to India and was now in Bollywood films, dancing and singing as she always wanted to. These thoughts comforted her mother and helped her carry on for the sake of her younger daughter. Efforts to find Georgina resumed from time to time. In 2016, nearly 10 years after she vanished, a resident of Stendhal Street contacted police about a troubling neighbor who invited underage girls over regularly. This neighbor was a 35-year-old Turkish immigrant named Ali K. Publicly, Ali K appeared to be an exemplary family man. He was married and raising 3 kids. But closer investigation worried police officers as they delved into his background and personality. 4 years earlier, he had already been under suspicion and investigated by authorities due to concerning behavior patterns. At that time, he deceitfully lured a local schoolgirl by promising to sell her a trendy smartphone at a symbolic price. He took the girl to his storeroom, located in the basement of the apartment building. There, he struck her on the head and coerced her into intimate closeness. Afterward, he made the teenager swear she wouldn't tell anyone about what happened. He then her a paper napkin to wipe her tears and helped her tidy up before leaving. The girl promised to remain silent, just to escape from his clutches. But as soon as she was free, she immediately told her parents about the incident, and together they went to the police to report the violent actions. The schoolgirl detailed the man's storeroom in the basement, noting that it looked more like a maniac's den. Ali was arrested that same day, but vehemently denied his guilt and shared his own version of the events. According to him, he was indeed selling the gadget, and the girl herself expressed a desire to buy it. As the smartphone was in his basement storeroom, they went down together. When the guest examined the device, she said that she had always dreamed of such a gadget, but since she didn't have the money, she was ready to pay in another way. Following this, according to Ali, the girl began kissing him and started undressing. He tried reasoning with her, but ended up pushing her away forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head. This explained the injury and bruises on her body. However, the fact of intimate closeness could not be proven as Ali had used a contraceptive, which he later disposed of. Ali's wife Melik fully supported her husband and also began accusing the girl of indecent behavior and attempts to seduce her husband. Ultimately, Ali received only a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Nonetheless, as soon as the police took up investigation into the disappearance of Kruger again, they decided to check him thoroughly once more. Ali K did not have a permanent job and got by on odd jobs, mainly living on benefits. He loved gambling and often incurred debts. Being a regular visitor at a Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building allowed him to make acquaintances who treated him to food and drinks. Despite his precarious lifestyle, Ali carefully maintained his appearance, desperately trying to look younger than his years, wearing fashionable clothes even if it meant spending children's benefits on them. The main oddity about Ali K was his attraction to young girls, which raised several flags during this renewed investigation into Kruger's disappearance. To ensure that the suspect wouldn't become suspicious and would feel secure, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Moabit area to open a car service station. A few times, he visited the cafe in Ali's building, loudly discussing business plans and details with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned the need to find a manager soon, noting that it was a well-paying position and that it was important to choose wisely. After these words, the second man left while Hakan stayed to finish his coffee. Suddenly, Ali approached and sat at his table. He immediately offered himself for the manager position. A conversation ensued, which quickly turned into a casual chat. The businessman noted that Ali might fit the role and then mentioned the salary. Ali's eyes lit up at the figure. He began dreaming of paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always wanted. The men exchanged phone numbers, and from that day on, they began communicating regularly. Their relationship quickly grew into a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to get closer to him and gain his trust. But this friendship had an unexpected effect. As the suspect tried to appear as the best version of himself to his prospective employer, he boasted of his achievements, even minor ones, and preferred to stay silent about any wrongful acts. Several months later, realizing that the case was not progressing, the investigation decided to introduce another agent, this time a woman who would play Hakan's girlfriend. This introduced Susan into the scenario. Her goal was to befriend Ali's wife Melik and try uncover any secrets her husband might be keeping. It only took a few meetings for them all to get along well, after which all four started socializing as families. Melik was sociable, but regarded her husband as nearly a saint. For years, she had turned a blind eye to his infidelities, did not believe the schoolgirl who accused him of violence, and remained convinced her husband was simply unlucky with jobs, despite being a very good person in her eyes. But now, everything would change soon. Susan realized that Ali's wife wasn't just covering for him. She truly believed he was incapable of harming. The agents decided to use a trick by spreading a rumor that progress had been made in the crew case, and an unnamed source had indicated where to find her body. Hakan left a newspaper with this article in his car, which Ali had started borrowing occasionally. Several cameras and recording devices were also installed in this car. When the suspect and his wife got into the car, she soon noticed the newspaper left behind, quickly skimmed the article, showed a bit of surprise that the case was still being investigated, and then, indifferently, put the paper aside. It became clear that Melik knew nothing about this. Otherwise, she would have inadvertently revealed herself. 6 months later, the investigation finally concluded that their plan had failed. The K family had become friends with the agents, even trusting them to look after their children. But no confessions were forthcoming. Ali strived to appear honest and upright, and his wife was simply unaware of the crime her husband had committed. Maintaining their cover was becoming increasingly expensive. They even had to lease a space for the supposed auto repair shop and sign a sham employment contract with Ali to avoid raising his suspicions. The investigation then took a desperate last step by introducing another agent who would play a villainous role. According to the backstory, his name was Kor. He was Hakan's cousin, had a criminal record, and was running some underground business. The hope was that Ali, meeting a kindred spirit, would open up and confess his sins. The men quickly bonded over their shared interests. Kor treated his new friend to drinks, and together they visited various clubs and houses of ill repute. The new friend confessed that he made money through not entirely legal means and thus wanted to spend it indulgently, with Ali willingly helping him in this endeavor. Simultaneously, Kor constantly complained about his girlfriend, with whom he supposedly could not break up because she was blackmailing him and threatening to report his illegal business to the police. According to him, she was constantly demanding money, and her needs were growing. One day, while having drinks with a friend, Kor declared that he intended to rid himself of the bothersome blackmailing girlfriend in a radical way and was willing to pay 100,000 euros to anyone who would do the work. Ali perked up at this and offered to take on the task himself. His friend agreed but suggested they discuss the details in a secluded place when sober. In November 2017, during a monstrous confession while sitting in a car, the men discussed the plan to eliminate Kor's nuisance girlfriend. At one point, Kor doubted whether Ali was capable of taking a life. In response, Ali revealed something he claimed no one else knew. He confessed that more than 11 years ago, he had taken someone's life with his bare hands. Ali stated that in 2006, a stunning young girl had moved onto his street and completely captivated him. She passed by his house twice a day on her way to and from school, so he memorized her schedule and would step out to greet her and pay compliments. Despite her young age, he described her as attractive and felt intense desire for her. One warm September day, when the girl was returning from school, and the street was unusually quiet and deserted, Ali saw his chance. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move some items from his storage area, and she kindly agreed, not sensing any danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and tried to kiss the schoolgirl who struggled and screamed. He then knocked her unconscious with a blow to the head and took advantage of her. After the incident, afraid she might report him to the police, he decided not to let her go. He grabbed her throat with his hands and squeezed as hard as he could. Ali described this process in detail, explaining how he felt the crunch and sensed the pulse in her neck fade away. The girl's body lay in the basement for several days. If the search team had looked into his storage area during this time, they would have immediately uncovered the perpetrator, but no one suspected anything, and once the commotion had died down. He wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin, which went directly to the landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded on a camera installed in Cora's car. By the evening of that same day, he was taken into. Unfortunately, the girl's remains were never found, as the waste at the landfill was regularly incinerated. Her body was essentially cremated. The trial and verdict. The hearings in this case lasted another 2.5 years before a final verdict was delivered. The criminal adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had fabricated the entire story to gain Cora's trust. In reality, he planned to rescue his girlfriend by turning in his friend to the police as soon as he received the money. No additional evidence was found besides the criminal's own confession. However, his detailed and vivid account was enough to convince the jury of his guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Joradzina's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of ever being released. His wife Malik never believed in her husband's guilt, convinced that he had implicated himself while pursuing a noble cause. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This harrowing tale unfolded in North America, with Mexico City as its backdrop. The central figure in this story is Alejandra Lafuente, a resident of Mexico City. Alejandra is described as having striking brunette hair with bright brown eyes that highlight her thick, black lashes. She had a fit and athletic build, which she diligently maintained through fitness routines, yoga, and breathing exercises. Alejandra took great pride in her appearance and loved self-care rituals. Frequent visits to beauty salons, massage sessions, and spas showcased her commitment to personal upkeep. During warm weather, she could be found lounging on the beach while engaging in scientific work. On cloudy days, she often visited tanning salons. It's safe to say that Alejandra had a strong sense of self-love and viewed herself as an epitome of feminine beauty. Career-wise, Alejandra also exhibited ambition and determination not to lag behind others' successes. Her father is Dr. Alberto Dente, an esteemed psychiatrist well known for his research into mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and manic disorders. Notably revered for both his scientific contributions and experiments with patients, which many view as groundbreaking, Dr. Dente's achievements set high standards for Alejandra, who aspired to attain similar levels of success. She pursued a similar path as her father. To achieve this, she enrolled at one of the top universities for psychiatry and graduated with honors. Her perseverance, resourcefulness, and extraordinary intelligence, along with her father's connections, greatly assisted her in writing and defending her thesis on manic syndrome. However, Alejandra did not later engage in psychiatry. She became drawn to the field of psychotherapy instead. With the financial support from her father, the young professional obtained a license and set up her own practice in a new business center located in the heart of the capital city. There was no shortage of clients, but Alejandra decided to focus solely on women. Women struggling with eating disorders, depression, relationship issues, and low self-esteem sought her counseling services. Alejandra worked diligently to help solve family problems. Yet, despite her professional success, her personal life was less fulfilling. Alejandra's first marriage ended in divorce. She had 2 charming girls who inherited their mother's eyes and their father's sense of humor. Despite the failed marriage, Alejandra was not discouraged. To her, having 2 children was not a reason to neglect herself or give up on finding happiness again. She still aspired to meet a man who could be both an ideal partner for her and a good father figure for her daughters. Sometime after their separation, Alejandra's ex-husband would visit their home on weekends to spend time with their daughters and assist Alejandra with household chores if necessary. These visits had become routine for the couple. On one such visit, Alejandra asked him to enter through the backyard because she claimed that the lock on the front door was jammed. The man entered as requested. Alejandra told him that their youngest daughter was bathing and asked him to join them in the bathroom without suspecting anything amiss. The man entered the bathroom and saw tape on the floor. Where was his daughter? The bathtub was filled, but no one. Suddenly, right at that very second, he sensed something was terribly wrong. His ex-wife stood behind him with a hammer in her hand. She struck him on the head with all her might, then delivered another blow. He fell instantly. A gaping hole in his skull poured blood everywhere. Later, experts determined the man had no chance to save himself. Death came almost immediately after the first blow from the heavy weapon. His eldest daughter, who unexpectedly returned early from a friend's house, witnessed this truly horrifying scene. Alejandra, it was determined, suffered from severe mental distress. She frequently directed her anger toward friends and even her husband, leaving visible scratches on his arms and neck. Housemates constantly witnessed her tantrums over seemingly nothing and erratic behavior. This time, things went out of control. The eldest daughter ran out of the house screaming for help instantly, and a neighbor rushed over to call the police squad. Alejandra was arrested and charged with murder by professionals at the station and placed in a cell where she stayed for a month until her first hearing. At trial, Alejandra denied any guilt. Her lawyers argued self-defense. According to them, her ex-husband was intensely jealous of Alejandra and falsely accused her of bringing men into the house, delusions that could affect their little girl's psyche negatively. She said that he showed up unexpectedly at his ex-wife's house, sneaking through the back door to catch her with another man. When he found Alejandra in the bathroom, he allegedly pounced on her and she had to defend herself, resulting in 2 blows to his head. On June 14, 2012, the sentence was handed down. Considering the evidence presented by the defense and the presence of 2 minor children, Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months. Thanks to the coordinated work of lawyers and the financial support of her father, the term bars was replaced with a suspended sentence. A couple of months later, an appeal was filed again with a request to drop the charges with by. The argument is assault in self-defense. Human rights activists felt deep sympathy for Alejandra, portrayed at trial as a victim of domestic violence. As a result, the court reviewed the case anew and handed down an acquittal. Following her release, Alejandra continued her psychological counseling. She also maintained an image as a victim of gender inequality, fighting for her rights, just like many women in North America do. Ultimately, this portrayal made Alejandra even more popular among potential clients. Soon after, Maria Alejandra met Alan Carrera, a prominent Mexican businessman and son of Adrian Carrera Francis. Alan was tall and handsome with a statuesque stature. His father had been head of special services for the Central District and achieved considerable success in his career. Quickly, Alan expanded his business, creating a chain of construction stores that popped up all over the country. However, not all parts of Alan's business were above board. Some aspects were deeply entwined with criminal activities, which led to his father's removal from his position after one financial fraud incident was uncovered. Additionally, Alan had ties with a criminal group engaged in transporting psychotropic substances to the United States. The base for this illicit operation was located in a border town and guarded by bribed police officers. This group controlled a significant portion of psychoactive substance trafficking in the South. Evidence finally tied Alan's father to these illegal activities. Under pressure during interrogation, he gave a statement implicating himself and faced a potential 20-year prison sentence due to these revelations. On July 18, 2000, Adrian Carrera was released early. Following his release, he dedicated all his time to his son and legitimate business. His son grew up quickly, adopting his father's views and experiences. After graduating from college, Alan Carrera decided to follow in his father's footsteps and Alan showed a keen interest in a household appliance store. Despite his young age, he managed it entirely on his own. While it wasn't as large as his father's enterprise, it generated substantial revenue. Alan was always surrounded by many admirers, but he had been in love with a classmate since childhood and eventually married her. She was intelligent, beautiful, and from a respectable family. Their marriage was brief yet eventful. They had a lovely daughter together. However, the demands of work and Alan's frequent absences led to their divorce. The separation was extremely difficult for him, as he had loved her since high school. Subsequent relationships failed to bring him joy, leading to feelings of loneliness and sadness that resulted in excessive drinking. Alan developed a harmful habit as he tried various ways to cope with his prolonged depression and affinity for alcohol, attending meetings. Eventually, fate brought him to renowned psychiatrist Dr. Alberto. Interestingly enough, Dr. Alberto was the father of Maria Alejandra, Alan's ex-wife, who was also navigating through a challenging divorce herself. Despite their separation, she couldn't allow herself to be close to anyone else either. Maria Alejandra also sought counseling from a therapist. However, Dr. Alberto explained that ethically he could not treat both her and Alan simultaneously. He recommended she see another professional therapist without disclosing that this therapist would be Alejandra, his daughter. He was described as a pleasant man and quite wealthy. Without much thought, Alejandra asked her client to bring her ex-husband for another consultation. According to the therapist, she could resolve their issue in a single session and break the strong bond between the former spouses. From the first moments of the confidential session, Alejandra began implementing her plan to seduce the entrepreneur. The results were immediate. Right after the session, Alan invited the therapist for a cup of coffee to discuss family problems. Quite rapidly, an affair developed between them. Soon enough, Alan's ex-wife discovered their relationship and was shocked. She even considered reporting the incident to the doctor's ethics committee, but ultimately did not. Alejandra, being a very competent specialist, managed to convince her client to let go of her jealousy and move on from her former spouse. As a result, Alan's ex-wife decided not to file any complaints and discontinued their sessions. Meanwhile, Alan and Alejandra's relationship progressed quickly. A few months after their first date, they decided to move in together. 2 months later, they decided to formalize their relationship. However, Alan had no inkling of his fiancée's hidden secrets or the reasons behind her divorce from her ex-husband. In April 2014, Alan decided to visit his parents over a weekend and used the opportunity to talk about his beloved and their upcoming wedding. Alan's parents were extremely surprised by this news so late in the process. They had never heard of Alejandra before, which struck them as very unusual. A week after meeting with his parents, Alan and Alejandra registered their marriage. Interestingly though, Alejandra asked her husband not to invite friends and relatives. No invitations were sent out at all. The wedding was intended to be modest due to budget constraints, which did not permit inviting everyone they would have liked. However, as it turned out later, the bride's father did attend the marriage ceremony. Initially, the young couple's life seemed like a fairy tale, full of happiness and numerous plans and desires. But this didn't last long. Alejandra couldn't conceal her hysterical character, which foreshadowed the horrifying conclusion of this story that no one anticipated. The relationship between the newlyweds began to change dramatically. Alan was a rather secretive person and didn't share details of his personal life with friends. Consequently, little was known about what happened behind their closed doors. Nonetheless, it became evident that their former relationship had developed significant cracks, and the couple no longer appeared as happy as they once were. After meeting Alejandra, Alan distanced himself from his family. The final quarrel was the wedding to which his parents were not invited. After this event, They even ceased calling each other. Alan's remaining friends noticed that his spouse grew increasingly nervous and sometimes behaved inadequately, quickly losing her temper. Following a few such incidents, Alan felt deeply ashamed and decided to minimize joint meetings. Quarrels in the family occurred daily and were almost always unfounded. One evening, according to her own testimony, Alejandra decided to go through her husband's cell phone and discovered correspondences with several women containing inappropriate content. Understandably, it was impossible for her to ignore such things. Alejandra reported in court that her husband beat her, insulted her, and humiliated her in every possible way. When she discovered his infidelity as well, saving the marriage seemed pointless. For reasons unknown, Alejandra did not pursue traditional methods of psychotherapy to try and salvage the relationship. Instead, consumed by thoughts of her husband's cheating, she resolved to deal with Alan using a method already familiar to her. Once she made this decision, all her attention focused on devising a perfect murder plan. While Alan went about his regular, measured routine, he remained oblivious to the looming events. He communicated infrequently with his family. However, he couldn't ignore the annual feast celebrating his grandfather's birthday. As expected, Alan attended the event. Nevertheless, his parents made it clear that his wife wasn't welcome in their home. This situation upset Alejandra and worsened the couple's relationship. On October 31, 2014, Alan's phone last sent a text confirming he had arrived home safely after the party. From that moment on, his absence extended to his work too. This was highly unusual because Alan was known for his dedication to work. He hadn't missed work before, especially with an important store launch approaching where his presence was crucial. The cause of this sudden disappearance lay in Alejandra's horrifying plan executed after Alan's return from the celebration. Following a fierce argument, she spiked his milk with a powerful sleeping pill before suffocating him with a pillow. Alejandra watched as Alan struggled unsuccessfully to remove the pillow and catch his breath. After that, Alejandra dragged Alan's body to their neighbor's garden to retrieve an electric saw. Bearing a grim smile, she dismembered her husband's body into pieces. She then bagged the remains and ensured no identifying features remained by removing fingers and teeth. It was these details that would help the investigation in identifying the individual if the body was discovered. Alejandra packed all the bags into suitcases to transport the corpse out of the house without drawing suspicion. However, she did not succeed. As dawn approached, Alejandra could not leave the house with the suitcase unnoticed. An elderly neighbor who suffered from insomnia watched her from her window. She found the young woman's early departure and strange behavior. Additionally, for some reason, Alejandra's husband did not help lift the heavier suitcases, which added to her strange behavior as she continually looked around. At dawn, Alejandra returned home, which further surprised the vigilant neighbor. As it later turned out, Alejandra had scattered bags containing her ex-husband's remains across different neighborhoods to cover her tracks. The following day, she resumed her normal life. On November 6, 2014, police officers in Mexico City made a gruesome discovery. Human remains were found in a vacant lot near the city's outskirts. A few days later, bags containing arms and legs were located in various parts of the capital. The most chilling detail was the absence of fingers from these limbs. Teams of officers were quickly assembled and they methodically combed through the streets. Their primary objective was to locate the head and other missing parts of the victim and prevent further atrocities from occurring. Despite their efforts, the fingers and head were never found. However, by forensic experts, it was determined that all discovered remains belonged to the same individual. Sadly, without fingers or teeth, identifying this person proved impossible. To divert suspicion from herself, Alejandra began sending messages to Alan's relatives. Her aim was to avert suspicion. However, she only aggravated matters. Unbeknownst to her, Alan had recently distanced himself from his family and had no contact with his relatives. Alejandra informed Alan's parents that they were going on vacation and would be out of reach. This plan quickly unraveled when Alberto, Alejandra's father, began making phone calls to Alan's father's house. Alberto sought to find out if his son-in-law's family had any idea of Alejandra whereabouts. He hadn't heard from her in some time, and the family was quite worried about missing their counseling sessions. Later, Alberto reached out to Alan's relatives again. This time, he informed them that his daughter had been located, but had to be forcibly admitted to a clinic. She was suffering from depression due to her husband's infidelity. This news deeply alarmed the relatives, leading them to search for Alan without success. Subsequently, Alan's family turned to the police for help. Laboratory experts decided they needed to compare the remains recently discovered with Alan's characteristics. The resemblance was 100%. His relatives also identified him without a doubt. This was particularly hard on Alan's grandfather. Soon after the identification, he fell ill with heart disease, as Alan was his only grandson. The investigation team obtained a search warrant for Alan's home and office. They discovered a patch of freshly disturbed earth in the backyard. Upon digging, they found human fingers and teeth. Alejandra was immediately apprehended. More blood traces were found in one of the rooms, as well as on the trunk of a car and in the garage. Initially, Alejandra denied any involvement, hoping she could escape punishment as she reportedly had with her previous husband. However, investigators quickly pieced together the case. An elderly witness provided critical testimony. Her timeline matched Alan's estimated time of death. It came to light that Alejandra used her job to obtain a powerful sleeping pill, a medication typically accessible only to medical professionals, which further implicated her in the crime. The evidence linked Alejandra directly to her husband's brutal murder. CCTV footage corroborated that Alan had entered their house but never left. Additionally, this footage confirmed that suitcases were later removed from the house. On December 10, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict. Ale got life imprisonment for murder with cruelty in an attempt to hide it. Using her official position didn't help. Her father's connections and bribes couldn't save her either. All he managed was a closed trial, away from the public eye and the press. Sadly, he did it for his career. Now, hardly anyone will seek help from a specialist who raised such a ruthless monster and couldn't spot problems in his own daughter. During the trial, thoughts about the death of Alejandra's first husband popped up too. But the passage of time meant no evidence was found. There were even whispers about her father's involvement in what happened. People suspected he worked with her on these crimes out of some misguided scientific interest. Yet, no proof surfaced. After many appeals from the victim's side, her sentence changed to death. This is almost unheard of in Mexico today. Death sentences are super rare. Plus, she can't ask for a case review. Her house and property must go to the victim's family. Though, who can be comforted by that when their loved one is gone? Alejandra showed she was pragmatic and cruel. She had major mental health issues, although medical exams said otherwise. Influenced by her father and using her position, she executed her manic plans without fear. After her first crime went unpunished, which let her off the hook, Alejandra felt untouchable and kept doing evil things. Maybe Alan would still be alive if this dreadful woman hadn't been acquitted before. Don't you think justice needs to catch up faster? We can't let monsters roam free because of loopholes or failures in our system. Let's ensure people like Alejandra face consequences right away so they don't get a chance to continue their wicked ways. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jamie Melgar. Sandra Melgar often lies in her small prison cell, reflecting on the unexpected turns her life has taken. She never thought she'd become a widow and a suspect in her husband's murder. It's unbelievable that a year and a half after his death, a grand jury indicted her, and nearly 5 years later, a jury convicted her based on circumstantial evidence alone, with no clear motive or physical proof linking her to the crime. At 59, every day since her husband's passing has been a living nightmare. In a recent interview, Sandra said that she still catches herself thinking she'll go back home. Her blue eyes were red and puffy as tears streamed down her pale cheeks. She mentioned wanting to tell him things, forgetting he's gone. It doesn't feel like he's really gone. It's like he's temporarily away or on a trip. She added that she tries not to dwell on it, before pausing tearfully. Sandra has been incarcerated at the William P. Hobby Unit, a women's prison in rural Texas, for the past 10 months. Despite her circumstances, she has managed to stay connected with her friends and family, many of whom remain convinced of her innocence. She regularly talks to her daughter, Elizabeth Liz Melgar Rose, although the noisy prison atmosphere and her soft voice often make their conversations difficult. Sandra also keeps in touch with her friends through letters, and they update her on her Pomeranian, Lola, who was present at her house on the night of the incident. Most weekends, Liz's mother, Sandra, gets to spend a couple of hours with a rotating group of friends and family, thanks to the efforts of one of her closest friends, who coordinates these weekly visits. Liz acts as her mother's strongest advocate, taking it upon herself to speak on her behalf and passionately discussing what she sees as a grave injustice that has taken a devastating toll on her mother's life, depriving her of both her husband and her own freedom. Sandra is haunted by the memories of the fateful night of December 23, 2012, when her husband met his tragic end. Her inability to recall the events of that night has sparked suspicions among investigators who find it suspicious. Despite this, Sandra remains resolute in her assertion that she did not commit the crime. As Sandra lies in her prison cell, her thoughts often wander back to the evening she and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary on December 23, 2012. That night, Sandra Melgar was jolted awake by the incessant barking of their dogs, her vision blurred as she struggled to orient herself in the dimly lit room. Her body ached and her head throbbed as she lay on the closet floor, her hands and feet bound behind her back, her undergarments soiled. Sandra, at 5 feet 4 inches tall, attempted to stretch out her legs and roll over to look through a gap under her closet door. However, her bindings and the 2 hip replacements she had undergone restricted her movement. Even if she could manage to free herself, a chair had been placed in front of the door to block her access, with the door handle inaccessible from the outside. Inside the bedroom closet, Sandra's husband of 32 years, Jamie Melgar, lay dead, with 31 stab wounds on his hands and chest. The previously white walls of the closet were now stained with blood, and a gray telephone cord had been used to bind his feet together. A medical examiner's report confirmed that Jamie's injuries were all defensive wounds, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker rather than trying to escape. A particularly vicious blow had almost severed his right thumb, which likely caused the extensive blood spatter found in the closet and bedroom. The bedroom was in disarray, with dresser drawers open and contents scattered everywhere. Clothes, books, and pill bottles littered the floor. Sandra's black purse and red wallet had been rummaged through, and their contents were spread out on the blood-stained white comforter. A small white medic stool at the foot of the bed had bloodstains on it, suggesting it had been used as a makeshift surface for the attacker's knife. The back of a nearby wooden chair was also stained with blood. In the jacuzzi bathtub, where Sandra and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary the night before, several items bore witness to the tragic events. These included a white blouse, a green towel, and a silver chef knife with a 6-inch blade, all stained with blood droplets. The police later identified this knife as the murder weapon, which had been used just hours before the horrific events unfolded. Sandra and Jamie had been celebrating their 32 years of marriage with a romantic dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. They had planned to continue their celebration in a relaxing way, with a jacuzzi session accompanied by candles, cocktails, strawberries, and whipped cream. Even after more than 3 decades together, their love for each other remained strong, as Sandra would later tell the authorities. The couple's journey began during their senior year at Lamar High School. Jamie, with his unruly black hair and a somewhat awkward teenage mustache, was immediately drawn to the 17-year-old Sandra, who had blue eyes and blonde hair and sat in front of him in class. At first, Sandra resisted Jamie's advances for weeks, but she eventually agreed to join him and a group of friends for ice skating. Unbeknownst to her, Jamie had orchestrated the whole event, and when she arrived, only Jamie and his best friend were there. The others had mysteriously disappeared. Jamie's charming nature, humor, and penchant for corny jokes eventually won Sandra over. She admired his intelligence, thoughtfulness, and sense of humor, while Jamie appreciated her intelligence, down-to-earth personality, and lack of pretentiousness. They soon became inseparable, and in 1980, 2 years after graduating from high school, they got married in a courthouse ceremony in downtown Houston. On the anniversary of their union, Sandra and Jamie spent a romantic evening in their jacuzzi, reminiscing about their shared history and dreaming of their future together. They discussed selling their home to embark on a world tour, visiting iconic destinations like the Grand Canyon and Ireland, and witnessing the breathtaking Northern Lights. With Jamie's retirement as a computer programmer with the Houston Independent School District just 5 months away, they envisioned buying a beachfront property where they could settle down after their travels. As they chatted, they took turns giving each other massages, culminating in a romantic moment of intimacy. After 2 blissful hours in the jacuzzi, their peaceful evening was abruptly interrupted by their dogs barking. Jamie got out of the jacuzzi, wrapped a towel around himself, and put on Sandra's slippers to attend to the dogs. Little did Sandra know that this would be the last time she would see her husband alive. When Sandra woke up approximately 15 hours later, she was horrified to find herself bound and gagged in her closet, her hands and feet tied, her body sore, and her undergarments soiled. Jamie was nowhere to be found, and the frantic barking of their dogs was now accompanied by unfamiliar voices inside her home. Sandra screamed out in desperation. Herman Melgar stood outside his brother Jaime's house, confused, just after 4:30 p.m. His brother had invited him and his family for dinner, but now, despite ringing the doorbell and calling, there was no response from Jaime or his wife Sandra. What struck Herman as unusual was that Jamie's black truck was parked in the driveway and Sandra's silver car was inside the open garage. He told his family to wait by the front door while he took a look around the backyard, glancing over the fence. Noticing the plastic tarp hanging from the pergola on the back porch, Herman remembered that Jamie had been working on various home improvement projects. Returning to the front yard, Herman decided to check the laundry room door inside the garage. To his surprise, the door was unlocked, so he entered the house. As he stepped inside, Herman was met with an unsettling atmosphere. The house was dimly lit, gray and stuffy, with all the blinds drawn shut. The dogs were barking and jumping around, which added to the eerie feeling that Herman's daughter Marissa would later describe as unsettling. It was at that moment that they heard muffled screams. Herman rushed to the back of the house and found a large chair propped against the bathroom closet door. Inside the closet, Sandra lay on the floor, wearing a black satin nightgown, desperately screaming for help. Herman and his wife Maria struggled to remove the tightly bound restraints from Sandra's arms and legs. Herman got a pair of scissors from the bathroom to help free her. Meanwhile, Sandra kept asking about Jamie's whereabouts. She had visible bruises on her arms, including a dark one on her left bicep. After they finally freed her, Sandra rushed into the bedroom and found Jamie's lifeless body protruding from the closet. She checked for a pulse, but it was clear from his cold, pale, and naked body that he had passed away. Sandra covered Jamie's body with a blue jacket, and Maria escorted her back to the bathroom. When the paramedics arrived, Sandra was in hysterics, making it difficult for her to communicate with Stephanie Roberts, the first paramedic to arrive on the scene. Roberts' report stated that Sandra was in shock, cried periodically, and had lost all sense of time. Her last memory was of around 1 a.m. that morning, unaware that 15 hours had passed and it was now evening. The police documented bruises on Sandra's hands and arms, as well as a small scratch on her left thumb, but found no blood on her. Sandra told the police that after Jamie let the dogs in, she got out of the bathtub and went to her closet to get dressed. Her next memory was waking up in the closet at an unknown time, and at some point she screamed for help, but then fell back asleep, possibly having a seizure. Sandra had several underlying medical conditions, including lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and grand mal seizures, which had forced her to resign from her job as a licensed vocational nurse. She believed she could no longer perform her duties effectively due to her seizures. In the weeks leading up to Jamie's murder, Sandra had experienced auras, which she knew were warning signs of an impending seizure. During these seizures, she would sleep for hours and wake up in a state of confusion, disorientation, and severe pain. As crime scene investigators carefully searched the house, Sandra was taken to an interrogation room at the Harris County Sheriff's Office. She mentioned that the room was too cold and was subsequently asked to take a polygraph test. Sergeants Cazal and Douay questioned her for 3 hours, focusing on the 36 hours leading up to Jamie's death. Sandra spoke quietly and complained of a headache during the interrogation. She remembered some details clearly, such as removing her boots in the bedroom, changing in the bathroom, and recalling their conversation in the jacuzzi. However, she struggled to remember other details, and her recollection of time was imprecise. When questioned about the timeline, Sandra initially stated that Jamie had left her for 15 minutes to let the dogs in before she got out of the jacuzzi. Later, she suggested it might have been around 5 minutes. Sandra admitted that she was not good at estimating time and was making an educated guess. 2 days after the murder, Liz met with Cazal and Douay to report that several items were missing from the house, including a TV from the bedroom and Sandra's medication bottles of hydrocodone and phenobarbital. She reminded them that a backpack containing a gaming system and games had been left in the garage, which she had previously mentioned to detectives. Liz also shared information about her mother's seizures and health issues, expressing her concern for her mother's fragile state and possible post-traumatic stress. Although she hoped that something might trigger a memory later, this meeting did not yield any significant breakthroughs. Liz continued to follow up with phone calls, even pointing out damage to one of her parents' rental homes. However, the authorities eventually stopped responding to her inquiries, leaving both Liz and Sandra unaware of the investigation's progress. A year and a half after the incident, Sandra was secretly indicted for Jamie's murder by a grand jury in July 2014. Because of state law, grand jury proceedings are confidential, keeping the public unaware of the discussions and evidence presented during the process. Despite the indictment, Sandra's case progressed slowly over the next 3 years, involving at least 4 prosecutors from the district attorney's office, until it was assigned to Colleen Barnett in May 2017. Colleen Barnett had rejoined the DA's office in January of that year, following a 4-year break during Kim A's tenure as district attorney. Throughout her 24-year career, Barnett had built a reputation as a diligent and fair-minded prosecutor, according to both her colleagues and the attorneys who had opposed her in court. She had handled over 70 murder trials, including the high-profile capital murder case of Suzanne Basso, who was executed for luring a mentally disabled man to Texas with the promise of marriage and then killing him. Barnett knew that Sandra's case was tough. There was no clear motive, no confession, and no direct evidence linking Sandra to the crime. Despite the challenges, Barnett was convinced of Sandra's guilt. During the 13-day trial that began in August 2017, Barnett presented Sandra as a cold-blooded killer who carefully planned Jamie's murder, luring him into their bedroom with the promise of sex. Barnett told the jury that Sandra had used a gray telephone cord to tie Jamie's feet, then fatally stabbed him from chest to neck. The prosecutor highlighted the discovery of a bag of sex toys on the bed, which Sandra later claimed was a joke gift from a friend. Although Barnett couldn't exactly say why Sandra did it, she offered several possible motives, including Jamie's life insurance policy with HISD and Sandra's alleged desire to end their marriage. However, as a Jehovah's Witness, Sandra's religion did not allow divorce. Sandra's attorney, George Ma Sechrist, a well-established and respected legal expert, presented a contrasting image of the seemingly fragile woman sitting at the defense table. According to Sechrist, Sandra was a victim of investigators who had jumped to conclusions, forming a theory within 2 hours of arriving at the crime scene. He backed this claim by pointing out that they had initially attempted to file murder charges while the crime scene investigators were still processing her home. Sechrist emphasized the lack of physical evidence linking Sandra to the crime, highlighting the fact that her blood was not found at the scene and that she had no cuts on her hands. He offered an alternative explanation. Sandra had been the victim of a home invasion, during which she suffered a head injury and was bound in her closet while the intruders killed her husband. For the jurors watching Barnett and Sechrist in the courtroom, the atmosphere was likened to a high-stakes boxing match, as the two lawyers clashed in a battle of wits. Barnett landed a significant blow with the help of Celestina Rossi, a blood spatter expert and crime scene reconstructionist from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. Rossi testified that the evidence at the crime scene contradicted the idea of a home invasion. She highlighted several key points, including the absence of signs of forced entry, the untouched dresser drawers in the bedroom, and a lit candle on Jamie's nightstand, which suggested that no struggle had occurred near the closet where Jamie died. Rossi explained that most of the blood was confined to the closet, with a few exceptions, such as spatter on the back of a chair, the white medical stool, and tiny droplets on the comforter. According to Rossi, this spatter was likely caused by the injury to the artery near Jamie's thumb. Rossi concurred with the medical examiner's report, stating that all of Jamie's wounds were defensive in nature. She also noted that Jamie's loaded handgun was inches from his body in the closet, untouched. Rossi emphasized that in a situation like this, one's instinct is to try to disarm their attacker rather than shoot them, even if they are approaching with a knife. After 8 hours of deliberation spanning several days, the jury, comprising 8 men and 4 women, reached a guilty verdict for Sandra on the charge of murder, sentencing her to 27 years in prison. Although this sentence was shorter than the maximum possible 99 years, it was still a significant sentence. In explaining their decision, the jury foreman later stated that by the time Sandra would be released, she would be in her early 70s and might have the opportunity to see her grandchildren, adding that they considered this decision humane as they did not view Sandra as a threat to society. When District Judge Kelly Johnson announced the verdict, Sandra let out a loud shriek and nearly collapsed into her chair. The courtroom, filled with supporters who had been convinced that the trial was merely a formality to prove Sandra's innocence, was left in stunned disbelief. Despite attempts to reassure Sandra that everything would turn out fine, perhaps to boost their own morale, the reality of the situation suddenly became clear, and everything fell apart. Sandra, clad in a red blazer and relying on a cane, was escorted out of the courtroom, where she paused to share a final emotional hug with Liz. Once they released each other, Liz crumpled to the floor, overwhelmed by grief. Having lost both her father and mother to a justice system she felt had failed them catastrophically, Liz was left feeling utterly alone and devastated. The jury foreman staunchly defended the prosecution's case, arguing it was the most plausible explanation, despite being rooted in speculation and theory. He highlighted the discrepancies in Sandra's account and questioned the legitimacy